Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have a set of subscriber interviews that are truly amazing to me, and I hope to you. They show just how dangerous these creatures are, just how dangerous our government is, and yet there still is some good out there. Before we get into this, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. The merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things, they do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's encounter, shall we? My guest tonight has been on another channel, and tonight is Brad's Redemption. Brad, how are you?
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate taking time out of your evening to share your experiences with us. And, I have talked to you for 2 times now for, about an hour and a half, 2 hours each time. I kind of feel like we're friends. I agree with a lot of what you say and a lot of your views and feelings. And through the grapevine, like everyone knows on the channel, I don't listen to other channels. And, I've heard that you got a bad rap. And I kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to, let everybody know what your views on your encounters and why, things went down the way they did. Like I said, Brad's Redemption. I don't feel like, the way you described everything, how it went down, I don't think that you did anything wrong. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, and you can kind of...
You want me to, Jeff, would you like me to go over what I feel about that first, or would you like me to share my most recent encounter with you first?
Why don't we go for the most recent encounter, and then, or... whichever you're comfortable with.
No, that's how I would do it. Yeah,
okay.
Let's do. I'll give you the encounter, and then you can, that might jog our memory as far as what are the things that we want to talk about regarding me. But you did a great job, by the way, of sharing my encounter. You read it almost word for word, short some of my expletives, but my encounter, and I want to say first before I launch into this encounter that I did not intend on seeing a Dogman. I now live in a different state, Arizona to be exact, and I had a friend who is a Canadian who drove down here. I believe it was this middle of June. I think this happened on Friday the 17th, if my memory serves. And he came down a few days before that, and he stayed, a few days after. I think he was here about a week. And he's a hunter, and he's up in, I think he's in Saskatchewan, is the province that he lives in. And I guess there's a lot of hunting there, and he's a pretty avid hunter, mostly deer and elk and that type of stuff. And he does know, he's one of my closest friends, and he does know about my previous experiences, but he doesn't really believe me. He thinks that because I'm a part-time writer that I came up with these stories just to, like test a script out on an audience.
Right.
And I assured him that wasn't the case. For
and
any
you're not
of
a
these.
hunter at all either. You're a collector of firearms.
No, I'm nothing. I'm not tactical. I'm not a camper. I'm not an outdoorsman. I am an adrenaline junkie. I've been in a lot of fights. I like to, I've jumped out of planes. I bungee jumped. I used to surf really, really large waves when I was younger.
Right.
I do none of this stuff has been recently, right? In my early 50s now, so none of this is recently, but I am somebody that likes adrenaline. I love that feeling of almost losing control. And, I'm a gun guy, right? I'm not a gun nut, but, my grandfather was a collector. My father was a collector. I'm a collector. I've been around guns my whole life. I've spent probably hundreds of hours at the range. I used to be a member of a single action, which is like a cowboy gun, for those who don't know, single action shooting society member. So I got really good with that. I'm just a guy that spent a lot of time with I'm not really good with rifles, even, to be honest with you.
Right.
I have some rifles. I have, enough that I could defend myself, but I'm really just a handgun guy. That's my specialty. I like handguns, and I'm good with them. I'm accurate with them. At 30 yards and in, I usually don't miss.
Right.
And so, but other than that, I like to hike. I can hike 10 or 12 miles if I need to, and I've done it many times. So I do like to hike. I do like to be out in the outdoors, but I'm setting the stage for this so that your listeners know I'm not like a camper or an outdoorsman. I'm not tactical. I don't go in. I don't do tactical drills, or I haven't been to any tactical schools. None of that. So I don't consider myself any of those things. I just consider myself, an aging old surfer from Southern California who is good with a handgun and likes to hike. That's
right.
Really, and
you're not John Rambo.
No, I'm
right.
definitely not John Rambo or John Wick, either
right.
one.
Yeah.
But I am somebody, though, that when somebody says I can't do something, or that I don't have the balls to do something, it puts a fire under me, and I'll see if I can do it just to say that I did it.
Right.
But getting back to my most recent, I just was setting the stage for some of your listeners who haven't heard me on another channel. So my buddy Kevin shows up, and he's there a few days, and he says, I'd like to do a little hunting. And so I said, okay, whatever. So I found a spot north of Flagstaff. You gave the where it was when you read it, so I won't go over that. But it was north of Flagstaff, east of Flagstaff, in some mountains that are set aside. I guess if you can hunt there. And it wasn't deer season, though, which was interesting, because I told Kevin, he had mentioned, well, I'd like to get a deer, but he, as a hunter, I'm sure he knew this, although he's from Canada, maybe he didn't know our laws here, but it wasn't hunting season, and I told him that. And he's got a little bit of money, so he said, well, even if I get one, I'll just, and then there's a pretty big fine if you end up shooting one that's out of season. It's pretty substantial fine. But he said, well, if worse comes to worse, I'll just pay the fine. So I said, fine. So we ended up, we found a place to go. So this would have been Friday, June 17th. So coming up on a couple of months ago now. And we got in the car and we left, I don't know, 6 or 6:30 in the morning. It was about an hour and a half, maybe hour and 40 minutes to get there. And as you read, when you went over the story, we pulled into a gas station when we were getting pretty close to our destination. And we got out of the car, and we were going to go in and get a coffee and have it for the rest of the trip. And when we were walking into the mini mart, coming out, he had just come through the doors, was this old Indian man. and kind of smallish, 5'9" or so, hair in a ponytail, totally gray. When I say old, I really mean old. He was, I would say, early 80s. And he was walking directly in my path, and so out of respect, I didn't want to bump into the guy. I stepped to my right, and he had eye contact with me the entire time. And when I stepped to the right, he quickly stepped over in the same direction and got right in front of me. And he took a few more steps towards me, and he put his hand on my heart, which, needless to say, it took me by surprise. First I thought he was going to hit me, but he was very gentle. He just put his hand on my heart, and he said, "Strong spirit, but your risk taking, your recklessness." I'm sorry to guess what he said. "Your recklessness and your risk taking are going to get you killed." And then he removed his hand. He smiled at me, and he walked over to his car. He was under the canopy, just like our car was. In fact, I think he was in the next car over. And as we watched him, Kevin looks at me and he goes, you know that guy?" I shook my head and I said, "I've never seen that guy before in my life." And he thought that was strange. I thought it was strange, and the more I thought about it, the stranger that it got. It kind of got into my head as we were driving. We got our coffee and we put the gas in the car, and I was driving, and we went on to our spot, right? But as we were driving, that kind of started getting into my head. How could he have possibly known that? How would he know that I'm a risk taker? And how would he know that, I've been told earlier in my life that I have a, quote unquote warrior spirit, or a strong spirited person, independent, and which is what I took it. That's how I took it to what he meant. And I don't know that for sure, but that's how I took it. And, so as we were driving, Kevin mentioned that, he goes, "That's really odd that guy would say that." And I said, "Yeah, I said, I told you weird stuff has happened to me my whole life, man. So this isn't anything new." But I said, it is kind of odd that he knew that. And I don't typically believe in any of that Indian or Native American, if you will, mumbo jumbo stuff, the curses, and I don't believe in any of that stuff, really. And but I have to admit that I thought it was odd that he knew those things about me, even though we'd never seen each other before. So we got to our site, parked the car off on the side of the road, and Kevin said to me, "How you feeling today?" or something along those lines. And I said, "I'm good. Why?" And he's like, "Well, I feel like, really doing some hiking. So let's go way back up in there." I said, "Okay, whatever." And he's my age. We're both born in the same year. He's a little bit smaller than me. He's about 5'11", maybe 180 pounds. And for your guess, I'm a fairly decent sized guy. No giant, but I'm about 6'3", maybe 230, 228, somewhere in there. And he was carrying a Tika rifle, which is a very, very nice rifle, a high-end bolt-action rifle, 7mm. And then he had I think it was a CZ 9mm that he was carrying as his sidearm. And I didn't have a rifle with me, for your listeners and those listeners who have heard me before. I didn't even have a rifle on me. I wasn't carrying a long arm of any I had a 357, a 686 plus, 7-round 357 on my thigh. And as usual, I was carrying a 2.5-inch in my ankle holster that underneath my pants. That was our entire arsenal. We did not go there. I repeat, we did not go there to hunt a dogman, to kill a dogman, to even see a dogman. In fact, he and I, before that, as we were driving, we didn't even talk about Dogman. We talked about him. We talked about Dogman when he first got here.
Right.
We talked about it a little bit, but we didn't talk about it at all.
Yeah, you were under the impression, like you stated, that, and you said, hey, if you shoot a deer, it's going to be a lot of money. You were just under the impression that you were going on a hike, and that's what your agenda was for the day. You weren't going hunting. You were just hiking with your buddy.
No, I I was wearing some loopholed binoculars, and he had said, and I'm not really a hunter. I've been hunting maybe twice in my life, but I'm not a hunter of any. In fact, the only thing I've ever killed is a dogman, right? And so when we were hunting, when we were out there, he had said, "Will you just be my eyes for me, and help me?" He has a scope on his rifle. He had a really nice scope on his rifle. I think it was a loopholed as well. But anyway, he said, "You just be my eyes, and you look for me, help me find things, and when you're scanning like a spotter." And I said, "Yeah, no problem." That's all we were going out there for. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I know I'm belaboring the point, but I want to make it perfectly clear. We did not have any intention of seeing, hearing, listening, none of it regarding a dogman. It was the farthest thing from our minds when we, and like I said, we didn't even talk about it once on the trip out there or the day of this. So I'd say maybe an hour and a half or two, maybe not, maybe an hour of walking. It's probably, I don't know, around 11 at this point, maybe, maybe a little earlier, maybe 10, something along that late morning time. And we came up, we were walking through fairly thick. It was forest, but it wasn't like, when you picture forest, like where you're from, Jeff, where it's real dense and there's trees every 2 yards, right. That's not what this was. This was like a tree here, a tree there, but there was enough of them you would still say that it was like a forest, right?
Right.
I guess you call it an Arizona forest. People that are from Flagstaff who are going to be listening to this, they're going to know exactly where I'm talking about. But we were walking through, and really it was a really nice day. Things were really quiet, but not as quiet as they were about to get, but they were quiet and peaceful. All we could really hear was our walking as we were going through. It was peaceful. The air was crisp. It was hot. It's June, right? It was pretty hot, but it was pleasant, very pleasant actually. And we came, I'm going to say it was an hour and a half into our walk, because I was starting to get tired. And as we were coming through the forest, we came up to this like opening, and there was to our right, and I'm going to try to describe this as best I can like I did on the other show so people can really try to picture what happened. So as we come through the forest, or a light forest we'll call it, right, to our right and up maybe a little bit elevation-wise was this knockdown tree, whatever wood, I don't know what type of wood it was. I'm not even into that. I don't know what type of wood it was, but it was like a white color, like, because it had been petrified, it looked like, and it had been there for many, many years. It was probably 50 feet, if I had to guess, maybe, 40 to 50 feet, right? And it was laying on the ground facing this open, semicircled, almost looked like a stage, because there was a like a half circle where there were trees in the forest, and then there was this open area where it was just rocks and a few shrubs, but basically flat, almost like you would envision an amphitheater back in the
Roman day. I was just going to say that kind of.
Yeah, at Greek or Roman days, you would picture an amphitheater. It was kind of like that, and it was even elevated a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And then it kind of went down into a little gully, and then it was elevated back where we ended up sitting down on the log. So as we saw this, right, there was trees on the right, trees on the left, and then trees back on the far end of this semicircle, and then there were no trees. It was open. So it was almost like we could see into this semicircle, if your listeners can picture that. So as we got over to the log, I said, "Oh, this is perfect height, man. We can sit on this. Why don't we stop and eat?" It was probably, I'm going to say, I might have been off on the times here. I think it was probably closer to 11 when we sat down there. And I had brought, peanut butter sandwiches and some water, some beef jerky, and I think I brought something else too. But anyway, we sat down and, we started eating, and we had finished, we were talking, and I noticed, like, right as I was finishing my sandwich or getting towards the end of it, right, I noticed that it got quiet. And any of your listeners that know, I've listened to your show before. They know what that quiet
the
means.
silence, yeah.
The silence, and it was deafening, right? It got really quiet, and I said to, actually, Kevin said to me, he said, "Man, I got a bad feeling, dude." And I said, "Yeah, I know, me too." And my head was on a swivel, right? And that was the first time that Dogman even popped into my head. From the beginning of all of this, when all this morning started with him, this was the first time that it occurred to me, like this was the same thing happening all over again, where it got silent, right? Now, we still hadn't heard anything. It just got silent. There was no bugs, nothing. In fact, I could hear myself chewing. That's how silent it was. And, I'm looking around, and Kevin, he said again, he's like, "Dude, man, something's up. I just don't feel right." And he even stopped eating and put the sandwich back in the plastic bag, and I was carrying the backpack with the food in it, so he put it back into my backpack. And I finished my sandwich, and I'm starting to drink the water, and I'm like, "Yeah, dude, this doesn't feel right, man." And so we were kind of worried, and he's like, "Well, do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, I don't see anything. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything." And he's like, "Are there bears here?" And I'm like, "I don't think so. I mean, maybe black bear, but I don't think. I know there's not grizzly." Right. Even in northern Arizona, I'm pretty sure there's no grizzly bear or something that big, right? And I don't think there's wolves either. So I said, it could be a mountain lion or something like that. But I said, you got a 7mm. It's not going to be a problem if it's a mountain lion. So we sat there, and then I don't know. I'm trying to remember exactly how long after that we had decided we were going to get up and keep walking a little further into it, because there was where the semicircle was, there was like a I don't want to say an opening, but that's for lack of a better word or term. There was kind of an opening on the far side, because we were in front of the semicircle. And if we kept going straight, we would go back into the forest, right, and keep walking. And there was a hill in the distance, and he wanted to kind of get to the base of that hill. So I said, "Okay, well, we're not that far from that, so let's just keep going." When I sent you that email, it was still fresh in my mind. Right. Or more fresh in my mind. So whatever it says in there is probably more accurate. I'm trying to do this based on on my memory. But it seems like I said to Kevin, because I'm hard of hearing, and I said to him, I said, "Did you hear that?" And he goes, "No." So I'm listening, and then it sounded to me like somebody walking right through the brush. A ways away from us still. It was kind of distant.
Okay.
And so Kevin goes, "Oh, yeah, now I hear it." So, I put my binoculars up. I'm looking around. I don't see anything. And he looked through his scope. He didn't see anything. And I said, "Well, I don't, that could be anything, right?" And so, but sure enough, maybe 15 seconds after I said that, we see this really large, I don't want to call it black. To me, it looked more like a chocolate colored brown wolf, right? It was on all fours. Comes through the thing, right? And immediately when I saw that, I don't remember if we had sat down behind the log. I just don't remember what the events were, if we sat down behind the log. But I remember when we saw that, I told Kevin, I said, and he was already looking through it, and he goes, "That's a big wolf, man." So I walked around the log, and I was on the far side of the log, right? And I kind of bent down, and I was looking through my binoculars, and, he was kind of like the wolf was kind of like sniffing on the ground. He was acting like a dog, his tail was wagging a little bit. And then he went over towards a tree, and he was sniffing at the base of a tree at the far end of the semicircle. And, it really did, just at that point, it was looking like a wolf. But I said, "That's a really big wolf," right? So, of course that fear came over me, right? I'm like, you know what? that's too big. That's not a 150-pound timber wolf. That's way bigger than that.
Right.
And Kevin concurred. He was like, yeah, that is big, dude. And I said, you know, at this point, the creature, this animal hadn't seen us yet, right? So I got down behind the log was probably, I don't know, 18 to 20 inches off the ground, right? So I got down. I wasn't all the way down, but I was still, you know, I was crouched down. And, you know, Kevin, as he was, you know, staring at this, I could see his face, right? And when I looked over at him, I could see that he'd never seen this before, right? Something this large before, right? And he kind of got this, like, I don't want to say he went white, but that's what it appeared to me, is that he was kind of going white on me. And as he was looking at it, you know, he turned his head and he looked at me and he's like, dude, I don't think that's a wolf. And when he said that, I looked through my binoculars, right? And as I'm looking at this thing, sure enough, this thing, like, stands up, right? And when it stood up, I can't tell you, I think I said it in the letter or the email that I sent you, I can't tell you the fear that I had. And of course, the first thing that popped into my mind was, not again. There's no way. And that's what I told you earlier when we were talking. This is hard to believe that this could happen to somebody this many times. Yeah. I understand it's hard to believe. I get it, because I would have a hard time believing it. But here it is. Here's this animal standing on its hind legs, and now it's like sniffing into the air. And when I saw it sniffing into the air, I knew it had caught scent of us, right? And I realized at that moment that I was still within its sight. If it would have turned and looked at me, it would have seen me. So I kind of panicked, and I don't know if it was the motion of me moving so quickly to get down on my belly, or if it was the sound that I made when I hit the ground. But as I went down, Kevin was looking through the scope, right? He was just over the log, and he said that it turned and looked our way. It didn't look right at us, but it looked our way when I got down, right? So I ended up crawled a little bit to the very end of the log, because we were already pretty close to the end of it. I crawled to the end of it and kind of like lurched my body sideways so I could see around it. So I was lower, but I could still see it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
so you were kind of like, you were almost laying right next to the log, kind of using that
on the ground,
yeah,
on my elbows. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. I wasn't any taller than the log, so I didn't stand out, but I could still see him. Now there was brush and there was, shrubs and stuff that were in between where our position was and where this, turned out to be a Dogman was, right? And so I would say that we were, I think I told you this in the email, but I think as best I could tell, we were about 80 yards. And so, I'm trying to remember the exact sequence of events here so that I get this right. So then as we were watching it, he kind of stood up and he sniffed and he kept doing that, right? And at one point he turned directly towards us and sniffed. And I told Kevin, I said, he can smell us. And Kevin said, he goes, is that an effing Dogman? And I said, I'm not 100% sure, but I said, I'm pretty sure that it is, because I've never seen another animal stand up like that, and he seems to be walking on his hind legs. So I'm going to say that that's probably a Dogman. And we're talking in really low, in case your audience is wondering, we were talking in whispers. Right. Kevin and I were only about 4 feet apart. So 5 feet.
Really quick, he is the one couple of times that you guys spoke about this. He, like you said, skeptical about it.
No, he thought I was making this up.
Right.
He thought, even when I told him that I had killed one of these animals, he thought that I was, again, because I do a little writing on the side. I'm not a professional writer by any stretch, but I do a little writing on the side. He thought that I was testing a script. That's what he said. That I was testing a script for an audience to see how they received it, and if it would maybe be picked up like as a movie or something. And I told him, I said, Kevin, I swear to you, brother, that's not what I'm telling you. What happened, how it happened, and all three of the encounters he knew about.
Right. Now, what was his face like when he said, is that an effing Dogman? And you said, I'm pretty sure that is.
Well, Kevin's got these blue eyes. I have green eyes, right? He's got these blue eyes that are very, like, what I call telling. And when you look into his eyes, you can almost see what he's thinking, right? And I saw nothing but unadulterated fear in his eyes, because even at 80 yards, you could tell by the reference points of how tall the Dogman was to the trees that he was around 8 feet.
Okay.
And I would say weight-wise, he's not the biggest one. The biggest one, was on another encounter I ever saw, was close to 9 feet and probably 600 pounds. This one, if I had to guess, I'm not saying I have an expert opinion, but my opinion would be he was probably close to 8 feet and about 500 pounds.
Okay.
And when he walked, you could hear the thumping when he walked. So he must have had some weight. If he was only 150 pounds, you wouldn't have heard him as he was walking through the forest like we did from that distance, right?
Yep.
So now I'm trying to remember the exact sequence of events at this point. So when, Kevin and I were talking, I looked at Kevin and I said, shh, because I had seen him look our way a couple of times. Now, I don't think he saw us, because he didn't act like he did at all, but he did look our way a couple of times. So I'm sure he either heard, and they have great hearing, right? Yeah. That he either heard the rustling or maybe the whispers or something, but he just couldn't place where it was. I have to say to anybody listening, I never even drew my gun. This entire encounter, what I'm about to tell you, I never even drew my gun. I never even pulled my gun at all. Right. Kevin was only using his to look through. So at some point, again, if people, go back and listen to what your show from 10 days ago or a couple weeks ago, if they want the exact, and I'm trying to do this on memory, and if I'm off on the sequence of events, what I'm saying is absolutely true and how it happened, but what I want to get right is the sequence of events, and that's what I'm not 100% sure that I'm giving the right sequence of, say, like this happening before that happened, but the sum and substance is there. So at some point when we're watching him, right, I hear again, like coming from the opposite side of the semicircle, I hear more footsteps, also heavy. And so now the Dogman, who's he's looking around, sniffing, right? He's just doing what Dogmen do, right? He didn't appear, in my opinion, I don't think he knew that we were there 100% yet. He was about to know, but he did at that moment. I don't think he knew.
Okay.
And so here comes this, I'm just going to say, a man, right? Here comes this really large, after we heard the crunching of leaves, we noticed, and I'm watching this entire thing through my binoculars, and these are really good binoculars, so I can see everything perfectly clearly at 80 yards. Perfect. And I hear this crunching, and I notice that at one point the Dogman then turns immediately. He takes about 3 steps back, and he's facing whatever this is that's coming through the other side. There's probably, I would say, 15 yards between the Dogman, and here comes this large, for lack of a better descriptive term so your audience understands, Nordic man with, like I said, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I really like women, so I don't want people to take this the wrong way. But he was the most beautiful man I've ever seen.
Right.
And he comes through the forest, and he's wearing this. I mean, the clothes didn't look that outlandish, but they just didn't. He had a black mock neck on, or maybe it was dark gray, and he had a light gray, what I would call like a windbreaker looking thing, and then these pants on that were a similar color to the jacket. Or no, actually they were a little bit darker. They were more like the mock neck, and then he had these like kung fu looking shoes. They weren't kung fu shoes, but that's what they looked like to me, because they didn't really have a heel on them. And he had this like wrapping like like the World War I soldiers had those things that they'd put on over their boots, so their boots wouldn't get caught in stuff, and then like it would come up above the bottom of their pants.
Yeah, so things couldn't get in their pant too. Yeah.
Right. It was similar to that, but it was just cloth that he had wrapped, tightly around.
Okay.
And he was wearing these like dark colored kung fu shoes, right? He had socks on. The only thing you could really see of him, everything was covered except his hands and his face. And he looked sunburned, but he had this, what I would call a long flat top type hairdo. I told you this in the interview, or in that when we first talked. He looked like he was much better looking than Dolph Lundgren, but that's who he reminded you of from Rocky IV.
Right.
Just that same type of haircut, platinum blonde hair like that, these piercing blue eyes that I could see through the binoculars. That's how blue his eyes were. I could see them looking through the binoculars at 80 yards away. Okay. So that should tell you how blue his eyes were.
Right.
And here he comes out, right, and he's wearing, now it wasn't a katana, but for lack of a more descriptive term, that's what it appeared like, and people don't know that's a samurai sword, right? It looked like a samurai sword, maybe a 2.5-inch blade, and then he had look to me, I don't know this for sure, I'm just speculating here, but it looked like a matching dagger that was maybe 12 inches long.
Okay.
On his hip, on his, I guess you call it his hip, on the opposite, which would have been his right side.
Right.
And he
not to correct you, but 2.5 foot, you meant, right? Not 2.5 inch.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to get it so people could, there was no mistake.
Yeah, not 2.5 inches. That would have been a problem, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So, and he had this like scabbard on the back of he had some sort of a strap that was holding the scabbard on the back, right? And you could see the sword handle sticking up above his head. Now, for your audience, when I say that this man was large, I'm not just saying it because I'm at 6'3" and we'll call it 230. I'm not a giant, but I'm a pretty decent sized guy. And this guy was, well, later on, as I get into the story, I know for sure he was about 6'8", but I even guessed him at that when he first came out. I said, this guy's got to be 6'7", 6'8", 265 pounds, a large man.
Right.
Not just a 6'3" guy and the 225 pounds. No, this was a large man, and you could see that he was muscular through his clothing, and his clothing wasn't tight, it was baggy.
Okay.
Well, at least the jacket was kind of baggy, but the mock neck looked like it was tight, but he had a jacket over it, and you could still see how big this dude was. So he comes through this like opening, and as he comes through, the Dogman kind of looks surprised and takes another few steps backwards. And as he does that, this man reaches behind and he pulls out the katana, and he does that thing, and I know you mentioned it, I don't know what it's called, but people who know swords will know what I'm talking about, that thing where you twirl it in your hand, right?
Yeah.
And he does it with one hand, right? And he just, he moves the sword, right? And at that moment, I think that was the moment where Kevin said, "Are we on a movie set?" And I looked at him and I go, "It kind of seems that way, right?" We're whispering, right? It kind of seems that way. And then Kevin, I think it was a little before that, now that I'm thinking about it, but again, go back and read the story if you guys want the actual.
Yeah, I'll put the link to the story in the description, so people.
I'm trying to get the sequence of events, but I think I'm off on that. But Kevin at some point had said, "Are we on a movie set?" And I'm like, "It sure looks like it, right?" But there were no cameras, there was no other people. We were totally alone, so I don't think we were on any type of a movie set, right? I mean, I just don't. But Kevin had said when this guy came out, Kevin lost his composure a little bit, and he gave away our position. And he kind of was babbling, and he's like, "Dude, should I shoot it? That guy's gonna get killed, man. That guy's gonna get killed."
Yeah.
And when he said that, both the Dogman and this individual looked. It's almost like we interrupted their about to be battle, and they both turned and looked at us, and I knew at that point that they knew we were there, because Kevin, he had lost control a little bit. He said it way too loud, and I knew they heard us because they looked as soon as he said it. And he said it a couple of times, and he's like, dude, should I shoot it? Should I shoot it? And I said, no, man, just be quiet. Be quiet. And he kept going, and I looked at him, and, I don't normally talk to my friend that way, but I could tell he was, he was scared, right? And so I said, shut the F up. And so,
yeah, he's losing it at that point.
He kind of gathered himself a little bit, right? And I think he said, copy that, something along those lines. And so as soon as I got him to quiet and I looked back, they were still staring at us, right? So I knew that they might not have been able to see our actual position, but they knew somebody was there at that point.
Right.
So the Dogman took 2 steps forward, and when he did, this man tilted his sword back and put the tip right against his forehead and closed his eyes. And I remember thinking, what? I remember my exact thought was, who in the hell is this guy? Because he seemed so calm, so like he had done this before. Right. And maybe he has, but I'm just, you don't know that when you're, you got to try to put yourself.
At this point, you don't know anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't know anything. You got to try to put yourself in my shoes. Your audience should put themselves in my shoes. I'm viewing this with all my baggage that I bring, and here I am now seeing this again. I'm not involved myself, but I'm watching this much stranger event than any of my encounters. I'm watching this strange event unfold, and here's this tall Nordic-looking, Anglo-looking dude closing his eyes when he's got a Dogman 30 feet in front of him and putting the tip of his spear against his forehead, and it looked to me like he was praying. That's what it looked like. And then he opened his eyes again. He did that twirl in his hand, and he pointed the sword right at the Dogman. Right? And they kind of stood, and they weren't moving. Both of them were just kind of locked in a stare. I don't know if they were thinking about what they were going to do, but then all of a sudden, it kind of took me by surprise how quick. I know how fast they are, but when you see them move, it's always, a little overwhelming to see just how quick they move, right? And he closed the distance so quickly. But what was more startling was how this guy brought the katana up to his right and slashed down, if your audience can understand what I'm saying, slashed down from top right to bottom left. And as he did it, he kind of did I don't even want to, I don't know how to explain it, but he was able to do that and move. He twisted his body and he moved. And while he was moving, he ducked because the Dogman swiped with his left hand, and he had his claws out. He swiped with his left hand, and the guy was able to avoid it, but he had put a deep gash in the chest, so deep that the Dogman put his hand up on his chest, and he turned around, and when he turned around, you could see the ray. He was bleeding from his chest big time. The Dogman and this guy were standing in the opposite places they had been when they started this fight, right? The man was on the other side, and the Dogman was on the other side, and they had squared off again. And so there was a little break in the action where they were just staring at each other. And I swear to you, I can't say for sure, but it looked to me like the dude smiled at him.
Yeah.
Like he looked at this creature and smiled at it, right? And you
could mocking kind of smile, a
mocking smile, like you don't know what's just about to happen.
Right.
That's what I took it, right? And so the Dogman was just like, he took his hand off his chest, and he was like, I don't know how to explain it, but he was kind of doing this thing with his hands. He was like he was shredding something, wanting to get at him, and he was growling and really loud and snarling. Just frightening stuff, right? And so I looked back at the man, and he's just standing there, right? And sure enough, they're probably only 15 feet apart. And so the Dogman maybe takes 3 steps, and he had closed half the distance in those 3 steps, right? And to my surprise, this man took 3 steps forward as well and drove the katana with both hands into the stomach and out up the. He drove it through the stomach, but it kind of went up and came out the back of the Dogman. And then as he did it, he kind of did a tuck and roll to his left, like towards us, but to his left. And the Dogman, and then he kind of turned around. The Dogman kind of spun around a little bit. And after he did this, the blonde guy actually turned his back and was looking out at us. And the Dogman was kind of going left and right and left and right. He was kind of like wavering. You could tell he was done just by looking at him, right? And the man was out, like, it was almost, I felt like he was looking at us, and he wasn't looking directly at us, but he was out looking like he was saying, to me it seemed like he was saying, did you guys see that? that was the feeling that I got, right? And so he had his back, this is how confident he was. He actually had turned his back on this Dogman. Apparently he knew he had him, because the Dogman kind of wavered and went right. He turned around a little bit, and he was kind of choking, and blood was coming out, and he's making all these noises. You could tell he was done, right? And so he fell only maybe 6 feet from the feet of this guy. So the guy takes his little, not a little, but it's a big dagger, 12-inch dagger out, and he walks up and he grabs the head, and he like lifts up the head. The Dogman was still alive at this point. He was a goner, but he was still alive. And he like grabs his head and he lifts it a little bit, and he plunges this thing into the neck of the Dogman.
Wow. And
I heard Kevin go, "What the F? Who?" And I'm starting to like go. And I said to Kevin, and this is the time I said to him, I said, "Dude, we got to be on a movie set or something. I mean, what?" And he's like, "Dude, there's got to be camera." He said that. He's like, "There's got to be cameras around here or something. This is some sort of we're watching some sort of special effects or something." And I said,
"Cryptid Kill Bill or something."
Yeah, it was we were just speechless. And so when after he drove it in, he kind of stood up, right? And he looked at it for a second, and you could see the Dogman slowly stop. He was moving, and then he stopped moving, right? And the man was just looking down at him, right? And then he turned and he walked out towards the end of, or like, the beginning of this semicircle, right? And he spoke directly to us. And he said, "You guys can come out now." Just like that. Regular American English. No English speaking, from England type, just a regular. It almost sounded like he was from California, to be honest with you. Just the way he said, "You guys can come out now." Just in that calm of a voice, right? So then he goes back, and we're still watching, and he goes back, and he pulls out the knife. He pulls out this little cloth from inside of his jacket, and he wipes down his dagger and puts his dagger back in its sheath. And then he pulls out he had to like move the Dogman's body a little bit, and he pulls out his knife, and with the same cloth, he wipes the blade down, right? And I noticed that when he did that, there was no blood of any kind. It looked the same way it looked when he brought it out from his jacket. He wiped off the blood, put the thing back inside pocket of his jacket, is what it looked like to me. And then he did this thing where he placed his sword back in the sheath that was on the opposite side. If you know, like when people wear a scabbard on their back like that, it's usually to one side of the head or the other. Well, with his right hand, he took it without finding it with his left hand and found the opening of the sheath. That's a 1 in a million type thing, right?
Yeah, just
and he was able to. Yeah, it was almost impossible, and he got it in on the first try, like he had done it so many times before. And so Kevin and I, at this point, and I might be out of sequence here on exactly, but you get the gist of it. And so we're looking at each other, and Kevin goes, "What do you think?" And I said, "I don't really know what to think, Kevin." Just like that. I said it just in that tone. I said, "I don't really know what to think." And I said, he's like, "Well, you think this guy's dangerous?" I said, "He very well could be dangerous." And then he said again, this man said again, he's like, "I'm not going to hurt you guys." And so I looked at Kevin and I whispered and I said, "Okay, don't point the gun at him, but keep the gun and keep your rifle in your hand. Just don't point it at him. And Kevin looked at me and he says, okay. So we stood up and we made eye contact with him finally. And we're about now, I'd say, because he'd walked to the outer end of this circle. So we were maybe 60 yards from each other. So we started walking, and he went back at this point over by the Dogman. And so we were walking up, and as we got up to him, I think I said first, however it's written in the story is how it went down, but I think I said first, where did you come from? And he said something like, I was out hunting, right? I think that's what he said, something along those lines. And, he had said, I think we said something along the lines of, or I said, well, he asked what we were doing, right? And we said, well, we were out hiking, we were, hunting. And I think I said, but I wasn't hunting this. And he said, not this time. And he smiled at me, and he called me by my first name, Brad. And he knew Kevin's name too.
Yeah.
And Kevin said, again, and I know I'm belaboring this, but I want your people to know how it's written, how you wrote it is actually how it happened. I'm trying to remember what he said, when he said it, and the sequence, but I'm just going to say what I think I remember. Kevin said, how do you know our names? And this guy said, oh, I think you know the answer to that. And he kind of smiled at us. And he had said when we walked up, he said, don't shoot. He put his hands up jokingly, right? He said, don't shoot me, Kevin.
Yeah.
And Kevin looked like he was about to shit his pants, to be honest with you. And so I said, where did you come from? And he goes, oh, I was out. And he goes, I was just hunting. I said something like, you were hunting with that? I said, you don't even have he's like, well, and he pointed to my 357 and he goes, that's cheating. He goes, if you really want to hunt one, something along the lines, if you really want to hunt one, the best way to do it is a sword. I started laughing, and I said, he pointed at my gun, and he goes, those are cheating. And he goes, and you well know, Brad, how hard it is to kill one with those.
Yeah.
And when he said that, it felt like he was reaching into my soul, and he was, you can tell when I'm talking about it, it's like it's almost too much for me to even believe that I lived it. And so we said a couple other things, and then I said, what's your name? No, that was after. I think that's when he was walking away. Yeah, that's when he was walking away. I think I said something like, so, what do you, and he goes, that's right. I said, what do you guys call these things? And he goes, well, I believe you guys call them Dogmen.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, you guys, well, aren't you a member of you guys, right? But I didn't say that at the time, but that's what I was thinking. And I said, well, what do you guys, and I kind of joked when I said that. I was, kind of had a smile on my face. I said, well, what do you guys call them? And he goes, well, they have many names, but the one we use most is Hellhound. I said, Hellhound, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And he's like, that makes sense. And he said, you guys got to be careful out here. And I said, really? And then I don't think you wrote this I don't think I wrote this in the email, but I forgot. But he had said, he was out here for you, Brad. And I said, who was out here for me? And he pointed down at the Dogman. And I thought that's what sent chills through and I said, really? We didn't, and then I reiterated, I said, we didn't come out here to hunt this. We came out here just to hike, and Kevin wanted to get a deer or something.
Right.
And he's like, he was here. He was here because you were here. And I just kind of shook my head, and I was, I didn't know what to say. And he goes, you guys really got to keep your head on a swivel when you're out here. And I said, yeah, no shit. And he kind of chuckled. And he said, well, I guess I better be getting back. and then he picked up the ankles of both legs and put and like you would carry a if you were going to drag something behind you, right, some sort of a big animal, you would grab them by the heels, right?
Yeah.
And in this case, it wasn't a heel. You know what the Dogman feet look like, right? He grabbed them by like that thing on the back of their foot.
Kind of like that ball thing at the back.
Yeah, that ball thing, exactly. That's how I would describe it too. And he started walking towards the opposite end of the semicircle, like he was going to go back into this. There was an opening on the other side of the woods. Not an opening, but there was enough room between the trees that he could walk, dragging this creature, right? And I said, "So that's it?" And he goes, "I'll see you again, Brad." And then he got maybe 10 feet away from me, and maybe not even that, maybe 7-8 feet away from me. And the Dogman was literally at my feet. And he said, I go, "So that's it? What's your name?" And he turned with he still was holding on to the animal, but he turned and he looked, and it was the first time that we made direct eye contact close like that. And he looked at me into my green eyes with his blue eyes, right? And he said to me with this quirky kind of smart ass smile, "You can call me Daniel."
Huh. Yeah.
And I said, "Okay, well," and he kind of turned around and he was laughing, and I said, "Well, I'll see you, Daniel." That was the last thing I said to him. And as he was walking away, he yelled out over his shoulder, "Don't shoot me, Kevin." And then he kept walking, and we could hear him laughing as he was walking. I mean, he had a sense of humor, right? He's like, "Don't shoot me, Kevin." Right. And he kept walking, and about maybe 15 seconds after that, we couldn't see him anymore, and all of a sudden we couldn't hear him anymore. He was gone.
That's where the email that you sent me ended. And you and I, like I said, have talked, a couple times extensively about, multiple things, but this encounter as well. And without getting into too much detail, but a lot of the subscribers that heard this had that same feeling that you did, that Daniel was an angel.
I don't believe in, I know that you may, or some of your listeners may believe in the ancient alien thing. I don't believe in the ancient alien. I believe that, without getting biblical, but Yahweh our God is God, and he has angels, and they look like this based on this research that I've done. Not every single one of them's blonde, but they always appear as Caucasian men with green or blue eyes in my research. And I have to say, as soon as I saw him, as soon as he came into my view, and you know how that old saying is, whatever your gut tells you when something first happens is usually right.
Right.
And my gut feeling was that this was an angel, because, okay, Jeff, he was too big. I'm not saying there aren't men that size. There's plenty of men in the NBA. Yeah. There's plenty of men in the NFL that are that size, but they're not perfect like him.
Right. He was perfectly proportioned. The face, like
he had his teeth were like so white that they gleamed in the sun.
Right.
He had the perfect lips, the perfect straight, Anglo nose. His ears were small. He had a small forehead with a full head of this platinum blonde hair. Not one blemish on his hand, because all I could see was his hands and his face. But they had no blemishes, no freckles. He didn't even have any face hair, now that I think about it. He had no face. It didn't even look like he had a beard shadow.
Okay.
It looked like there was no shadow, but he was sunburned, so I could tell that he'd been out in the sun before. So is it possible, to any of your listeners, is it possible that this was just some dude? That was just some badass dude? Yes, it's possible. It's also possible that we stumbled upon some hoax or movie set thing, and we just didn't realize that we were involved in it, and they brought us into it, I guess you'd say, and we,
Yeah, but you'd think you'd hear it,
Yeah, we would have heard people. We would have heard people, and we saw no cameras, and we looked too. Yeah. After I even spent time after Daniel had left, I spent time looking around, is this being captured on film?
Right.
I was looking around. It wasn't. This was a real incident. I mean, I can't say with 100% certainty. You can't say anything for 100% certainty.
No.
But I can tell you that this individual was perfect in every way. Like I said earlier, I've never seen a more beautiful man than this.
Right.
Any woman that saw this man would have said, "My God, he's perfect."
Right.
And not only that, he was huge. This dude was a badass. And by the way, he was more than 260. After when I got up close to him, he was at least 40 pounds heavier than me. And so he's probably 270, 275 maybe.
Right.
At 6'8". This is a big dude.
Just perfection. Like
perfection.
You honestly think, for me, when I read it and then heard it again and thought about it, the way you described him, the way you described how he just, you only heard him slightly. You heard that Dogman coming in for a period of time. This was not, he was like there. And then he grabs the Dogman and leaves. But you don't hear him after that. We heard him for about 10 seconds. Right. But then nothing. And then refers to the Dogman as a hellhound. Really, just to me, says this was an angel.
And what did he mean? What was the most telling moment for me, I think, is when he said, "You guys call him Dogmen." Well,
and knowing your names, knowing
our names.
The anticipation.
But what did he mean
Kevin
by
was
that, though,
thinking about shooting him at one point. You know what I mean? Or whatever, with a sense of humor. I mean, it just.
I don't know, man. I like I said, he didn't include himself in you guys.
Yeah.
And then he said, "We call them." To me, if he's part of the human race and the human experience, why wouldn't he have said, "We"? Why didn't he say first, "Well, we call them this"? And he could have included himself, in that with me.
Right.
But he didn't. He said, "You guys call them Dogmen."
Yeah, completely separating himself from...
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
Right. I mean, he could have been like, around here, you guys call them, but, where I'm from, we call them. But he didn't. He just said, you call them. We call them. He was just very...
There was a delineation between us. And this guy was, he showed... He didn't even... For your listeners, so that they can really picture this and try to understand how it changed. This has changed my life completely. This dude didn't even sweat. There was no. His cheeks weren't red, like how most Caucasians when they're exerting themselves, they get that red. Like I get, you get that redness in your cheeks. He wasn't even sweating or out of breath.
Right.
I don't know how else to explain it other than to say he was perfect in every way.
Right.
And he had a sense of humor, which you wouldn't, normally when you're talking about biblical things, it's such a serious thing. But this guy had a sense of humor.
Yeah, you don't think, but, he knew your name specifically, knew that, and you and I had talked about this, and it's almost like he was your guardian angel. And,
I don't want to say that because I don't want to speak for the Father, but it does seem to me, I'm a person that, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes, said that when you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth.
Yeah.
And so, is it possible that there's another explanation for this?
Absolutely.
That it was an alien of some sort? I guess you could say, but he sure looked human. Even though he was a perfect human, he sure looked human. He didn't look alien in any respect. My feeling is, I won't even use the term guardian angel because, but he knew about my past, and we'll get into that.
That's the only reason why I said guardian. Like, he was like, he knew you. He knew you. He also knew Kevin, but he knew you. So,
well, he knew I had killed a Dogman too.
And maybe that's, like you said, you don't want to, you can't really make the judgment, but in my eyes, to me, if he was, the angel that was sent to protect you at that very moment. He obviously knew you. He's, known of your past. So maybe that's where the sense of humor came in, or, who knows? But it's an absolutely...
When you hear this story, it's hard not to think. And again, I'm not trying to make myself as some... that I'm so important that I have to have an angel that's guarding over me. He may very well guard over other people as well. But if I had to guess, if you were to hold my feet to the fire as to what transpired, I would say, in my opinion, that this was an angel. And whether he was my specific guardian angel, I don't know. Right. But he did say that the Dogman was there because of me. He didn't say Kevin. He said me.
Right.
So that tells me that he was there, even though he didn't say this. It's kind of implied that he was there to protect me.
Yes.
Because I wasn't equipped. Neither one. I mean, Kevin did have a 7mm bolt action rifle, and if push would have come to shove, we probably could have fended if he was alone now, right? If he was alone, we probably could have fended him off. But had there been a pack of them, we were dead.
Yeah. I got about a half an hour of record time left, so I do want to kind of get into why we called it the redemption, not to cut this short, but
no,
we keep referring to your past encounters, and I have not heard them. They're on another channel. We're not going to mention the channel, but they are. Many people probably have heard them. You, in my eyes, really got a bad rap from what I heard from people who have heard your encounters, and knowing you now for, the time that we've spoken, I kind of got a really good feeling of who you are, and you're not a malicious person. You're not you don't strike me that way. So why don't we now, because like I said, I got about a half an hour. Why don't we kind of now touch basis on that? And okay. Just so everyone knows, this will be the last time Brad kind of shares any of this with anybody, Yeah,
I have no desire to go on any more shows. I only am doing this show because of what I'm about to tell you, how I feel like the other show that I was on, again, without mentioning names, because the person who runs that show was good to me, so I can't say anything bad about him.
Right.
But the people who made the comments in all of my encounters were, I would say, 80% against me and 20% for me. So it was overwhelmingly negative. I'll just give a brief synopsis. I've had 3 encounters prior to this in 3 different states now. This is why, if I was listening to this, I understand people would say, I can't believe this guy. This is just too much. I get it. Because I am a very logical, reasonable person myself. And I'd be like, what are the odds that one person has 4 encounters now, right? But I'd be lying then, because they did happen. So I have to tell the truth, and I wanted to come on a forum where hopefully I'm not treated like this bloodthirsty guy, who is just trying to kill Dogman every time he goes out into the forest. And, I admit that, well, let me start with my first encounter. I had my first encounter in Southern California, up in the hills. I lived in Southern California, let's just say close to the San Gorgonio Mountains. For people that are from Southern California, they'll know where that's at. And there's a park, a national park up there. And I used to go walking at night, and I had my first encounter not long. I mean, literally, 3 or 4 months after I even knew. I'd always heard of what Sasquatch and stuff like that, but I'd never heard of Dogmen before I started watching these particular shows. Right. And it was only 3 or 4 months after that I had this encounter. And it wasn't violent. It could have been, but it wasn't. In fact, I don't even think it was really necessarily evil.
No.
he could have, the Dogman that I encountered that time, he could have I was armed, because I never go into the forest unarmed, and I would advise everybody listening to never, despite what you may hear from other people, right? Yeah. I would never tell anybody to go in the forest unarmed.
Well,
period.
Really quick too is my subscribers know I go out in the woods where Tom Messick disappeared, and the majority of them say, "I hope you're armed." So this is why I feel that you're on a platform that you can explain how you feel.
Yeah, I do feel that, it's lunacy to tell people to go into a forest at night unarmed.
Yes. And
I'm not going to say that any other the person who runs the show tells people to do that, but perhaps guests have come on and have told people that, it's unnecessary to be armed, that, these animals know that you're armed, and if you're not armed, they'll leave you alone. And I mean,
they're an apex predator. They're a hunter,
They're opportunists.
Yes.
And if you're unarmed, you're an opportunity for them. They have killed many, many times. Every show that I've listened to, there's always a possibility when you encounter an animal like this, that's 500 pounds and 8 feet tall, there's a good chance, if it's hungry, that it's going to try to eat you or at least hurt you.
Yeah.
And, the idea to somehow, pray to it or ask permission to enter the forest,
right.
I don't want to make fun of other people, but if you're that dumb that you're going to go into the forest at night and get on your knees and pray to one of these animals to give you permission to go into the forest, sorry, but that's not how I roll, number one. And number two, you're going to get people killed telling them to go in unarmed, because then if you're attacked and you have no way to protect you, what's to stop you from being torn to shreds and literally eaten?
It's dangerous. It's very dangerous. It's not logical. It's yes.
These animals don't like. One thing I learned in my encounters is these animals do not like gunfire. Now, I don't just mean when you hit them with it. You can see them when it's close to them and gunfire goes off. The way that they flinch, they don't like it.
Yeah.
So if for no other reason, to have a gun with you when you go into the forest, day, night, whenever, and even if it's a 22, at least if you can have, showed one of these creatures that you're armed, I think you're much more likely to be left alone than going in unarmed and just assuming that they know because they're all knowing, or, you've prayed to them or whatever. It's ridiculous to me, but anyway, that was my first. I was in Southern California, and then my second one.
Well, first one, really quick, just so people know.
Sure.
That first Dogman that you saw, I believe the way I remember you telling me, it stood up. You had your firearm out, and you kind of did like a hand gesture, like, "Hey, let's just kind of." But it saw your gun. It kind of recognized what a gun was, and you both went your separate ways.
Well, he was standing. I heard growling to my right. I was on a trail, and I heard growling to my right, and I just assumed it was a coyote or something. Yeah. But when I got to a clearing and I could see into my right, off the trail into the little forest area, I could see about maybe 50 or 60 feet from me these yellow eyes looking at me, and they were over by a tree, right? And I was sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, man, that's a really large coyote, and I don't think there's wolves Southern California, even up in the hills, but it stood up then, right? And it was probably 7:10, if I had to guess, because later the next night I came back out there and stood right where it had stood, because at 6'3", I wanted to see how much taller it was than me, right? And it was about 7:10, and he as he put one hand up on the tree, he was staring at me with his yellow eyes, right? And I was looking right at it, right? And at one point, he kind of drops down on all fours like he was going to come towards me, right? And I had a 357. It was a 686 4-inch on my hip, and I had a little 38 special that I carried on my ankle. I never, even before Dogman, I never go into, because you could run across crackheads, drug addicts, bikers,
humans,
and they're probably more dangerous than Dogman, because if you're out there alone, you're at their mercy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm never going to be at anybody's mercy. I'm sorry. That's one of the reasons why I love guns so much is because they're the great equalizer, right? I mean, you can be outnumbered, but if you know what you're doing with the gun, you can save your own life.
Exactly.
So anyway, when he dropped down on all fours, I pulled my 357 and I aimed it right at him. And I really felt that he was reading my mind. And I was saying, you might get here and you might attack me, but you're going to take 7 rounds before you do. And he stared at me for another second or two, and he kind of like, they say that he smiled. I don't think it was a smile, but it was more where he showed his teeth to me. And then he kind of stood back up again, and we had a moment where we were just looking at each other, and then he, I don't know, maybe 30 seconds, he was holding the tree. We were looking at each other, and then he dropped down on all fours. I'm just giving the cliff notes here. I'm not giving the whole story because we're on time budget. And then he dropped down, and he looked back at me once again as he turned around, and I looked at him, and then he did this jump. He took a few steps. He did this jump where it was like he looked like 30 foot almost. He jumped away from me and to the right, so I couldn't see him because he was behind trees, right. And he was gone.
Yeah.
And that was my first encounter. And then there was, I didn't have any nightmares or, some of the people I've heard on other channels talk about, oh my God, I had nightmares. I mean, I already believed that these animals existed, but I never thought I would see one, especially in Southern California. But then when I went, again, I'm just going to give a brief story. Then I decided after I read the comments, I decided, because people say you can't kill these things. These animals are otherworldly. They go in and out of dimensions and all this other, they'll try to keep it G-rated, all this other stuff that was being said. They can cloak. Some of these people said, and I was like, wow, okay, this animal looked like a pack animal to me, just a very large pack animal. And so I made a decision that I didn't read those comments, by the way, for several months. But when I did, it kind of struck me the wrong way. And like I told you, when somebody tells me I can't do anything, it puts a fire under my ass. And I say, well, if you guys say I can't do it, then I'm going to do it, right? And so some of the people who made the comments, now again, 20% of the people were like totally on my side, like, leave this guy alone. He's an adrenaline junkie. Yeah. But the other 80% were like, you can't kill these animals. They're supernatural. The idea of hunting one, because I had mentioned in the pre-interview that I wanted to go hunt one, that like I thought that was going to be like my last, as I'm in my early 50s now, I thought that was going to be like my last big adrenaline.
Yes. I don't speak for people, and I hate when I do it, when people do it. But I want to say this, and I said this to you. When you're an adrenaline junkie like yourself, in your 50s at the time, you're getting older. You've surfed, you've skydove, you're into firearms. A lot of people who are into firearms and are adrenaline junkies go on big game hunts. Okay? They go across the ocean in Africa, hunt lions, hunt hyenas, whatever, dangerous animals. Yep. You wanted to, I'm not speaking, once again, I don't like speaking for people, but you're not uber wealthy. You're not like Thurston Powell III. You're going to go and, put your elephant gun on your shoulder and, do this. But you were like, you can't kill these things. Okay, yeah, I've got firearms that can. I want to see if I can, because adrenaline junkies. And once again, adrenaline is a drug, so you were just like craving kind of that rush, that feeling.
Well, it was that coupled with the fact that people had said you can't do it. Right. And so I put together a team, a guy that had worked for me in the past who was a long range. I actually won some tournaments, long range shooting tournaments, and then a Marine that I met in Oklahoma where my mother lived at the time. And we now live in Arizona, but at the time she lived in Oklahoma, and I went out and I met this Marine who worked for my stepfather, who's now passed away. And I put together a little team, and we decided that we were going to go hunt one. And long the short of that is that we went out and we found a pack of Dogman exactly where Mark, the Marine that I was with, who had been wounded in Iraq, he had told me when I brought it up to him about the Dogman and my encounter, he had said that he had seen one and he knew where they were. And I said, well, do you think you could find it again? And he's like, yeah, I know exactly where it's at. And this is in southeast Oklahoma in the Ouachita Mountains. I think that's how you pronounce it. I got in trouble for that too, mispronouncing the name. I'm not Indian, so
I do too all the time when I mispronounce things
I got laid into because I mispronounced the name of the mountain range. But anyway, so we went hunting and we severely injured one and then wounded 3 other ones. Turned out we thought there was one that we were hunting, right, that we had saw up on a rock. John, the guy that was the marksman, actually it wasn't Mark, John, it was Mark who saw it originally, and then John and I came over and I looked through my binoculars and John was looking through his scope and found maybe 600 yards away that there was this was the biggest one I ever saw. It was probably 9 feet tall and 600 pounds. Right. Huge animal. And John put 2 4.16s in it. Now he didn't get it in the head, even though we thought we got it in the head and it was dead. And I was going over to do what I had planned to do, which was to cut the hands, because I knew these animals are too heavy to move, especially for 3 guys. I was going to cut the hands and the head off and put them in my backpack.
Proof.
So I could that they exist.
Proof.
I know it's kind of gruesome, but that's what I was going to do.
That's what everybody wants, right? Is everybody wants proof that these exist.
Yes, and I was going to try it, and that was another thing. That was the whole point. I got accused of being this bloodthirsty guy that just wanted to kill something. I've never killed anything. I've never been a hunter. I've gone hunting a couple of times, but I never killed anything. And the only time I had a chance to kill a deer, I couldn't pull the trigger on it because I didn't want to hurt the deer. But these are not woodland creatures. These are not little furry animals that you can take jerky out into the woods and feed.
No.
These animals are apex predators that will kill you under the right opportunity. I'm not saying that they kill every time. There's lots of times they don't. But they are opportunists. They kill our livestock. They've killed people. They have terrorized people. So I don't feel bad that I wanted to prove that they exist, and I was told that there's no way, and I kind of believe now that the person who told me that there's no way you're going to prove that they exist because the government doesn't want us to know about them.
Right.
I believe that person was right about that they really don't want to let us know that these animals exist. But I don't think it's because the economy is going to collapse. I think it's because nobody would visit
national forests,
national parks, and number 2, nobody would visit national parks not well armed, and so they don't want, since our government is anti-gun, they don't want people running around with AR-15s and M1A 308s on their shoulder all the time and look like soldiers walking through the national park. But by all rights, these animals do exist, and that's exactly what we should look like, especially if you're going deep into the forest. I'm not saying you have to dress like that all the time, but if you're going to go deep into the forest and you're going to be away from a lot of people and you're on your own, you should be heavily armed.
Absolutely.
In my opinion.
Absolutely.
So anyway, to make a long story short, we didn't kill any of these dogmen. We gave it a great shot. We wounded 4 of them. I personally wounded 1 with my handgun. I had a Glock 10 millimeter. I had other handguns with me, but I used a Glock 10 millimeter, and I hit one about 5 times, 6 times. And Mark wounded 1 with he had an AR-10. He wounded 1, and then John not only wounded the 1, he wounded a second one that was coming up behind me that I didn't see.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you that part of it because on the 3rd encounter, and then we made it out of there, and the commenters after that were, oh my God, this guy's trying to kill dogmen. These are creatures that should be left alone. They should not be hunted. These are spiritual animals. And look, I'm not saying that it's not possible that there's other types of dogmen that are more spiritual, I guess, if you want to say that. But what I saw, my opinion is, and based on my encounter, these are just pack animals.
Right.
They're some sort of a hybrid pack animal. And in my opinion, they're the result of the fallen angels thousands of years ago taking and splicing men's DNA with wolf DNA, not ancient alien stuff. I'm talking about the fallen angels, literally, like the biblical story that, because there's some parts of the ancient alien they have right, in my opinion. It's just that they don't call them angels. They say they're aliens. But
right.
I believe that they're angels, and they were doing, they were trying to corrupt Yahweh's creation, and this is how they did it, by mixing all the DNA. And that's why we have pictures of these animals on the hieroglyphs. This is why we have stories of these in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Yes, Anubis, and this is why we have stories in the Middle Ages. I don't believe, and no offense to your listeners, but I don't believe in werewolves. I believe that all those sightings back in the Middle Ages were dogmen.
Yeah, like I don't think any of my subscribers believe they transform. That's 100%.
That's a theoretical and biological impossibility.
Yeah. Yep.
Because you would destroy the flesh. There's no way that you could go back. If somebody did change like that, it would be one time, because there'd be no way that they could go back, because they would have torn the skin to shreds.
Yeah. We literally we're coming up on time. I want to make sure that you get your last part out there.
Okay. So the last encounter was in August of 2021. I was leaving Oklahoma. My mom and I were moving. I take care of my mother, and we were moving back to Arizona, which is where she's lived, her property. And I went with a guy named Mike. I've just given you the short story here. I went with a guy named Mike. He's like a camper, outdoorsman, not really a hunter. He hunts occasionally, but he's more like
family.
Good friend of the family. He also worked as a handyman for my stepfather, and the 45 that he was carrying when this happened was a gift from my stepfather.
Right.
And he was carrying a 30-06 rifle. I went out there. We were not hunting a dogman when we went out there. I went out there because I wanted those wounded animals to know, because in the comments the people had said, oh, you left with your tail between your legs, you ran out of there, they could have killed you, but they chose to let you live, and there's no way you're ever going to go back there, you left with your tail between your legs, blah blah blah. And then I was just painting me out. Not only was I bloodthirsty, but I'm also a coward.
Yeah.
Now I'm a coward, and it's like, okay, well, how much of a coward was I, because I went out there in the first place, not once but twice.
Right.
And this time I went out lightly armed. And that's another thing. I was accused of being heavily armed. I was carrying 2 40 cal handguns and a 40 cal carbine. Not exactly what you would want to take if you're going to go hunting dogmen.
Absolutely not.
I did not go out there with the idea that I was going to hunt a dogman, but I did want them to see me.
Yeah.
I wanted to stand in front of them, or at a distance anyway, and let them smell, because they know your scent, supposedly. And I wanted them to know that I had the balls to show up again after what I had done, because we had inflicted a lot of damage on them.
Yeah.
And suffice to say, I saw one. The opportunity presented itself. I know we're running out of time, so I'm just giving you the short part here. It presented itself. I did not intend on killing one, but the opportunity, right, there's that word again, opportunity presented itself when I could see that it was by itself. He wasn't in a pack. And, I tried to make contact with it, and I saw that it had a circular scar on its what would that be? Its right shoulder. And that's where John had hit it with a 416. This wasn't the one that took 2 416s. This is the one that John hit that was coming up behind me. He hit it in the shoulder.
When you guys were leaving.
Well, right before we were bailing out of there,
right.
When we realized that it was 5 of them and it was too many.
Yeah.
And we were bailing out of there, and he hit it, and he hit it so hard he knocked it, and it went behind a boulder or a tree, I guess, whatever it was. And we never saw that one again. I didn't think he killed it, and obviously he didn't. If that is the same one, I don't know that for sure. I don't know if it was the same one, but I think that it was, because it was in the exact area that we were in.
Right.
So I ended up killing one. I chased one down. I fired at it. At first I tried to communicate with it, not, in a big way, but I said, hey, it's me. And I knew when he looked into my eyes, I could see there was recognition. And I fired at it. Well, I tried not to fire at first. I just wanted to get up close to it. I wasn't pointing my gun at it, but he dropped and was about to come toward me. So I, let him have it. And I hit him 4 times, and then he started to run to my right back into the forest. I fired 4 times more at that point, but I only hit him twice in his back, and there was blood everywhere. I followed him into the forest, and at that point, some of the people making comments said, see, at that point, I could have let him go and not followed him. I defended myself, and I could have just left.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. I could have. But at that point, I had committed.
Yeah.
I had committed. I said, you know what? I've already wounded him. I think I can kill this son of a bitch.
Also, really quick, too, for the people that, you've already wounded it. So by you hunting it down and killing it, you're also, for those people that, you're putting it out of its misery. For those people that,
that's how I saw it.
That's
how I saw it.
You started, you committed, let's finish the job.
Yeah, and I had a feeling that I could, and so I ran in after it, right? And I was, thinking about, should I put another magazine in? I didn't. I went with what I had. I had a 6-hour P226 is the gun that I used. I sent you a picture of it. Yep. With a 13-round magazine, and I had one in the pipe when I started, so I had 14 rounds. Later on, afterwards, when I ended up killing it, we counted the wounds because we pulled the body out to take pictures, and we counted 12 wounds. So I must have missed it 2 times because I didn't have any more bullets in my gun.
Right.
And then after I wanted to say something that was like smart and funny, or smart ass to this creature, because I've been told that they can understand our speech or the way that our voice, the tones of our voice, what we're trying to say, right? So I looked at it, and I was trying to think of something really like
kind of witty.
Deep and witty to say, and I couldn't. I could only think of those words from Samuel L. Jackson in Kong Skull Island when he's talking to King Kong, and he says, "Man is king." So I bent down my face only like 4 feet from its face, and I said it was still alive, and I said, "Man is king." And then I lifted up the gun, and I put the last 2 rounds into its head and killed it.
Right.
And then my gun slid open and locked, and I put another round in. Well, right before that, though, Mike had come up right behind me, and I, being aware that these are pack animals, I swear to you, there was a fear there when I turned around that there was another one standing there, and I almost put a bullet in his head. And I remember telling him driving home how close he came to dying that day.
Right.
The adrenaline was so out of control, I was shaking so much, I almost killed my friend.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
And then
really quick, we're almost on time, but I wanted to emphasize for you the redemption part, because I don't and you don't feel that you did anything wrong.
No, I don't feel I did anything wrong, other than I decided to take a risk that maybe I shouldn't have taken for my own safety.
Right.
But it's my life, and I enjoy pushing the limits.
Yes.
I've always enjoyed that, and that's why I did it. And like I said, I'm more scared of what happened after I killed that creature, having the pictures erased from my phone.
Yeah. You want to share that quick before we?
Well, somebody in the comments said that I had said that I was holding up my phone to see if it had service, and then as if like I needed to have service so my camera would work. But maybe I didn't say it when I was in that interview, but what I meant by that is that I realized when I saw that I had service that I could use my camera for my pictures. And maybe I wasn't elaborate when I described that, but that's what it was. I'm well aware that you don't need service to use your camera on your phone, right? I get it. I've had a phone since smartphone since 2011. I get it. But anyway, they had said that I was exaggerating, or then I told the story about how the scariest part wasn't the Dogman. The scariest part is when we got in the trunk when I escaped, and we were driving away. Mike and I, the guy that I was with, were smiling at each other because we thought we had about 20 pictures of these animals.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't have a hand or a head, at least I had pictures with my foot in every picture to show scale, right? And when we got in the truck, the pictures were gone. All right. 20, not one remained.
And the key emphasis point on that is there was service, and the only way they would be able to access your phone is if you had service, and we're only talking about one entity that wants to keep these things a secret from us.
Right. We don't have to say what entity, right. But everybody who has half a brain should know there's only one group or organization that would have the ability. And people said, well, how did they know? And I believe, this is my opinion, that some of these animals are chipped, and when they die, they're alerted to it.
Right. Absolutely.
There's no other explanation, in my opinion, for it. But I just feel overall that the majority of the people, because I know we're running out of time, the majority of the people who heard these interviews made me out to be either one of two things: a bloodthirsty killer, or this guy that's just, I made up this entire story and that I did it just for, I guess for attention. But I don't need that attention. If I really wanted attention, I would give my real name.
Right. You're not gaining anything out of any of these.
I'm not gaining anything out of this. No. There's no money involved. These are real stories that really happened. And as far as bloodthirsty goes, I'm saying here and now, I have never killed any animal other than a dogman. Right. Hunting.
You couldn't even kill a deer. You couldn't kill a deer because you didn't want to hurt it.
On a deer.
Right.
No, I didn't want to hurt it. But these animals are different.
Yeah, yeah. Before we end, I just want to I want to just say this, that you emphasize on opportunistic and things like that. Hyenas are opportunistic. It'd be no less than going in the desert or some part of Africa where a hyena is, and almost getting attacked by one of them. You would shoot it to protect yourself. Yes, you did go hunting one, but these things have killed multiple people. There's multiple accounts of these things killing people, terrorizing people. The
livestock.
One thing, livestock. The one thing that in Palmyra, Maine, a family was circled. The one thing that you did, and you just admitted to it, was you risked your own life. Everyone else that was with you was signed on to it and knew what they were getting into. You didn't risk their lives. They came as men of their own, but you risked your own life. That was the only stupid decision that was made that could be called stupid. Other than that, I've known you, like I said, for a brief amount of time, but we've talked for, the first night we talked 3-4 hours almost. It was a long time. And tonight we talked about this, we talked about other things, and I got a good feel from you. And I don't see you as a bloodthirsty, maniac. I don't see you as a coward. I feel like, you wanted to do something that most people want to do that won't do it, though.
Right. I'm just all I have different than other people. The only difference is I'm no better than anybody else. The only thing that sets me apart, like that Indian said, is that I'm reckless and I'm a risk taker.
Yeah.
That's it. And I did put other men at risk, but they knew going in. It wasn't like I lied to them. I told them exactly what we were doing, because there were some commenters that said, well, you put those other men at risk. But wait a minute. I told them what we were. It wasn't like I said, hey, we're going to hunt bunny rabbits.
Right.
I told them what we were doing, and they signed on to it. These are grown men, almost my age. They made their own decisions. So I just wanted to say in closing, I feel like I've gotten it off my chest. I wanted to say these things because I felt like the majority of the other audiences that listened to it, like I said, they either said I was bloodthirsty or I was, being a bullshit artist, and neither is true. I'm just a normal guy that decided to take a risk, and I had the balls to go do it. That's how I view it, and I did it, and I'm never going to do it again. I'm never going to go hunting for one again because I've done it now, and, people say these animals can't be killed. Well, if we're talking about this type of dogman, they can be killed. Is it possible there's another type that's somehow spiritual or invisible, or I haven't ever encountered them, so I can't speak to it, but in my opinion, these are pack animals. And if they can bleed, breed, shit, piss, and eat like we do, then that means they can be killed.
Yeah. Brad, it was awesome having you on. I'm glad that we were able to do this show. I'm glad that you reached out to me. And, in closing, thank you very much. I don't feel like you did anything wrong. And, I hope that you and I can talk for a while, for a long time now, because I feel like you're a friend now. So thank you for coming on, my friend.
You're welcome. And I really want to say in closing that people, Jeff's a good guy. He's an honest guy. He gives you a fair shake. He doesn't direct you or tell you what to say, and he lets you just tell the story. So, and he's a good guy. So to any of you listeners, you're listening to a good person, and I won't be doing any more Dogman stories. I've had my fill. hopefully, right? But I just wanted to get this out because I'm never planning on doing any more shows or talking about this again, but I just wanted to speak my piece, and Jeff gave me the venue to do that. So thanks, I appreciate it, buddy.
No worries. Thank you. Don't hang up because I want to talk to you a little bit after. So after Brad and I connected, did this interview, about a month and a half, maybe 2 months go by, and he reaches out to me again and says, Jeff, I have some very amazing information to share with you. I got to thinking after we did the interview, and I decided to go and just really kind of prove to myself and to everyone else that this happened. And that he did. So here is that interview. Tonight's upload is a subscriber interview. The subscriber was threatened by the government to keep his mouth shut about what he saw one evening and what the government used to intimidate him with was more terrifying than what he witnessed that fateful evening. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. Tonight I have a subscriber who submitted his encounter to me yesterday. I narrated it yesterday. He goes by G-Man, and he's here to share his whole family's encounter with us. It was kind of a plaguing time in his family's life. And G-Man, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us. I've talked to you for a couple hours actually before the interview. It's been good talking with you. So as you know, you've listened to my channel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the floor over to you so you can share the events that happened to you to us. So the floor is yours, my friend.
All right. Like I said, call me G-Man. Yeah, this happened. I guess this family event started on November 9th in 2016. Like I said, I was sitting in my front meeting room and I was watching something on YouTube. And again, about 7:40 in the evening, and my wife takes our dogs out in the evening and, to take them out. And because again, we have to go out in the backyard. We have this, it's all fenced in. We have a pool, but due to from the garage driveway to the inside of the pool, the deck goes up. So we have this 8-inch space between the gate. So we have a lot of rabbits that, they come in during the season, and they will burrow under the yard or under our shrubs. And again, we have this neighbor. He has these cats, and they will come up. They know exactly where the rabbits are. They can find them, and they'll come in there, and they'll sit there trying to hunt the rabbits. The only problem is when my dogs come out there, they will either chase the cats or chase the rabbits, and they chase the rabbits into the pool, or hopefully now and then just chase them outside the yard, and we have to stop them before they go try to get out from underneath the gate. Right. So that's why we have to go outside. I know that sounds weird. You have to go outside. Oh, you have a fenced-in yard, but yeah, that's why we have to go outside. So anyway, so I'm in the room, and my wife starts yelling my name and panic, and I'm like, oh God, and, I got to go out and break up the dogs and the cat, so I go out there panicking, like, oh my God, I got to break this fight up, what's going on? And instead of my wife out there, trying to break up a fight between the cat and my dogs, or trying to pull a rabbit out of one of my dogs, as a play toy, Mouse as a play toy. She's staring over onto the left side over at my neighbor's roof, or at least I think it's the roof. I look over there and I'm like, what are you looking at? And I'm like, to myself, I'm saying that. And then I look over there and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to find some kind of, raccoon or something on the roof. Well, it's not a raccoon. I see this cylinder looking craft. I guess a UFO unidentified object, and it's just hovering about 20 or 30 feet above the house. And it's a 2-story house. And it's, it looks like it's on, it looks like it's on fire. I mean, literally, it looks like it's on fire. It's got 5 appendages sticking out of the rear. So I'm considering that the base. I don't know. But there's these 5 appendages or legs sticking out the rear.
Now, when
you
sent me the encounter, you kind of you said kind of like tentacles, but were they kind of like
they're appendages? Yeah, like legs. Okay. I'm sorry.
So they were kind of like landing legs.
Like landing legs.
Okay.
Exactly. There are 5 of them.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's cool. I just didn't understand.
I typed it up when I sent it. I typed it up right then and tried to send you my story.
All right.
I meant to apologize if I messed up any.
No, it was great. I mean, I didn't know if they were off to the side but they were landing legs.
No, they were in the rear, which, like I said, I guess I'm considering that the base because there was 5 of them.
Okay.
Sticking out, and odd number, but there were 5. That's what I counted at least. I mean, this thing was standing in, it was stationary, hovering. Anyway, it was well, I consider phasing because it was changing from a bright orange to a dark orange to a reddish to a bright orange. It was, it was like it looked like it was on fire. It was almost kind of blurry looking. So I'm like, this is like really cool looking thing, I'm looking at this UFO this close to me. And so I yell at my daughter from inside the house to bring me out my video camera. Because she's asked me where it is. I'm telling her, and so she's bringing that, and I'm telling her to hurry up. So she brings me out to my camcorder, which is, like I said, a Sony DVD camcorder. It's not one of the newer models, but so anyway, she brings me this out, and I'm turning it on, making sure there's a good disc, a disc inside of it, and I'm turning it on. And again, if anyone's ever on one of these things, they're just like, it's like Windows booting up on your computer. It takes forever.
Yep.
So I'm sitting here tapping my feet waiting for this thing, my camcorder, to boot up. And I guess this object hears us or sees us. I'm not sure. All I know is it reacted to us. So it raises, goes up vertically slowly, about, I don't know, maybe 5-10 feet, and then starts going in an easterly direction for about, you have to understand, there's a 2-story house to my left, and our alley is right there, and there's a 90-degree curve to our alley right there at the one end of the alley, and it curves right, and there's a street. There's another 2-story house, and then there's a back street. So it goes in that direction and almost to the other street on the other side of the houses, and it stops, and then it changes direction and starts going into a southern direction, and it's going real slow. So I run in there real quick I'm still looking at my camera, and it's still booting up. So I run in to get my phone, and at the time I only had a Windows 10 phone. It didn't have the best camera, but it's the only thing I had. So I'm running, and I get it, and I'm trying. And of course, if you ever had a Windows phone, you're trying to find the pictures, and then, hit it with your finger and trying to get to the pictures. Anyway, it's about to the end of my alley, about maybe, I want to say maybe 30 yards, 35. And so I get a picture of it. And then by that time, my camera says ready. So I point my Sony video camera at it, and I take a small video, and then I said, hey, maybe I can see this better in night vision because there's no lights. Our neighborhood's fairly dark. Obviously it's above you. There, street lights. There's not a lot of street light pollution. So I turn it to night vision, and I get about maybe 3 seconds of video. Anyway, at that point in time, it switches direction again and starts to go back into an easterly direction. So my wife feels, well, it's gone. It's going away. There's nothing we're going to see. So she said, "Oh, that was really cool." So so she goes back inside, and so my daughter and I are looking at each other, and I make the quick decision and say, we're going after this thing because I want to get a better picture of it. I mean, it was so close. I mean, it would have been the best video ever in the world, at least to me, because it was literally right over my driveway, the other house. So anyway, we chased this object, and remember, I live in Allen, so if anyone lives in Texas, you'll know where I'm talking about. So I go in the easterly direction. I go up Jupiter and take a left. And I go through, what is it, Plano, because the cities all border each other, Garland, Saxe, actually 4 towns, and then I end up in Wiley, going on Highway 78, almost going toward Lavon Lake, which is pretty much country area, and there's no city. And at that point in time, like I said, I'm going there, the legal streets and having to stop at the lights and stop signs and breaking the law when I can. So, my little excessive speed, but anyway, but yeah, I lose it. It's, it's still going in easterly direction. I finally lose it. So anyway, we get back home, and I just figure, well, that was really neat, and I'm going to have a really great story the next day to tell my family and friends.
Absolutely.
So, go ahead.
No, I just said absolutely.
Yeah, I just, like I said, I thought it was going to be a great story. So anyway, so we get home, and a few days go by, and come Saturday, well, when the malls open up around, I don't know, 10 a.m., I take my daughter shopping. It was always kind of a weekend thing for us. So I take her out shopping to go to the mall. We go out, and my wife is home. She stays home. Usually one of us stay home with the kids. I call them the kids, my furry kids. They're like family. So anyway, we get home around 1:30, and we go in, and my wife is laying in bed, and sick as a dog, to use a an antique phrase. And I'm asked, I said, what happened? I said, what's wrong? And, hey, and she proceeds to tell me that she was out with it, earlier. She was, about, I don't know, about 11, maybe 11:30. She went outside and took the dogs out. And now she's on the right side of our yard. And the other side of it, there's another 2-story house. And anyway, she's got the dogs out, and she, out of the corner of her peripheral vision, she's, kind of up. She thought she saw was a flock of geese flying over in a V pattern. So she looks up, thinking she's going to look at a flock of geese flying over. Well, instead, she sees this triangle-shaped, grayish-looking craft, another UFO. Identified object, but anyway, and she says why she looks up, she says it starts to vanish in front of her. So this, I guess, just kind of bothered her a lot. So she literally picks up our dogs and goes back in the house, and she says about a half hour later, she starts to feel really sick. And by the time I get there, I mean, she literally looked like death warmed over. I mean, she was just, God, she really did. I mean, you ever looked at, I guess, the Walking Dead zombie without the falling off skin? That's how she looked like. So she's very nauseous and all, but very pale. So anyway, this kind of goes, like I said, and again, I describe my wife as a very strong woman. She used to work, her family used to have a ranch out in Rome, Texas, and they used to raise longhorns and other cattle and livestock, and she would barrel race. So she's a very tough person. And I'm not going to go into her medical history, but she's had some issues in her life, and she never misses work. I mean, that's all I'll say. I mean, if she's sick, I mean, it takes a lot to make my wife sick and to really be laid up in bed. I mean, she went on for weeks, and it's like nothing we gave her, nothing she took. She went to the doctor, nothing helped. But eventually, in a few weeks, she started feeling, she started to finally start coming out of it again, start feeling being herself again. So anyway, so during this time, I would go out at night, thinking, I'm going to, I take my video camera out because it's like, if I ever see you, I'm going to be prepared now. And since this happened to us twice, the first time I thought about it, now this has happened twice, so I'm going to, now I don't go outside in my backyard without taking a video camera. So I would go out there at different times of the night. And I went out one night, I think it was about, about 9. I'm guessing here. I forgot the time. I just know it was dark. And it was like 27 degrees. This is, I think, during December at the time going on. It was really cold. And I just remember, because I checked the temperature, was like 27 degrees. So I'm out on my patio, and I turn my video camera on because right directly behind my house, again, this is facing east. The rear of my house is facing east. And I look, and I'm seeing what it looks like a water tower. I mean, big old city water towers, kind of. And the only problem with this is one thing, it's higher than most of the houses, than all the houses. And two, I don't have a water tower behind my house. So that's a little strange. So I'm videotaping this, and for going on, and I'm noticing, and then it tilts in a 40-degree angle. Again, I don't know of any water towers that hover in the air and tilt at a 40-degree angle. So anyway, about 40 minutes of this, I found I'm too cold to stay, and I just finally, I felt I got enough footage, and I just finally going. So after this, I called MUFON. I said, I feel I have something I guess I can report to them. I think this is kind of neat. I guess UFO sighting, especially multiple ones, is not something most people have in such a short period of time or have at all. So I get on the site and I write a report. And a few days later, I get a phone call, and from a gentleman claiming, and I say that because as the story goes on, you find out, claiming to be a MUFON investigator. So asked me a few questions, asked me questions about, what I, besides the report, what I saw, got a description. And, I felt he's just, like I said, he was validating, what I was saying was true or not. So he decided, and I told him, I said, I have pictures and I have video. I said, he said, so we set up a time during the week, and he comes over and he interviews my daughter, my wife, and myself. And during this time, I'm showing him, I show him all my video and everything I have. So he finds the video, and of course, during this time, he says, you're not the only person that has called in and made a report to us and has seen UFOs in this area. And I said, really? And which to me, it kind of elated me a little bit, because it made me feel like, wow, I'm not I'm not a crazy person. I'm not the only one, my wife and my daughter aren't crazy, and we aren't the only ones that saw this. And so he said, of course, like I said, he claimed, said, yeah, they have several other reports. So anyway, he asked me all of a sudden, then he asked me, said, hey, can I have your pictures in your video? At the time, had not made any copies. I said, no, but I'd be more than happy if you give me your information. I'll send you copies. And he seemed a little drawn back by that, a little kind of like, no, that's not going to be good enough. I mean, that's the impression. It was like he wasn't happy about it at all. He was like, he actually insisted. I didn't say this before, but he actually insisted. He said, really, I can give you back this when we're done with it. And I said, no, I'd rather just make copies. I said, because just in case something happens and I don't get it back, I won't. I don't have any proof saying, this really happened. So anyway, so he agrees to, for me to send him copies. And he also, then he says before leaving, he said, well, just call me if you have any other sightings, or you forgot, you need to, fill any gaps or anything, to call me and let me know so I can fill out my report. I said, okay. So anyway, one day, I guess, a few weeks later go by, and all of a sudden, I go out about 5:25 in the evening to get the mail after work, and walk in my mailbox, and I hear a helicopter flying over fairly lower than most, because we have now and then a care life helicopter fly over. But this one's not flying in the regular pattern, and I look up, and it's not a care flight; it's a Black Hawk helicopter. So, and I was like, that's really odd, and it's flying directly toward me. It's coming from a westerly north, south, diagonal directly toward my house, from the north to south direction, kind of parallel to my house. Anyway, it's about 75 feet up in there and stops and hovers right in front of me. And again, I live in a very big, in a fairly big neighborhood. It's not a small neighborhood by any means, and I live in a Allen, it's a big city. It's not like I'm in the country here.
Right.
So this helicopter's hovering above me, and I'm staring at it and looking at the pilot. And as you can see him at 75 feet, it's not too hard to see him. And he stared at me, and this goes on for about, he's at me, like I said, I could swear he waved at me, and then flies off. I'm like, wow, that was really different. So I go inside, I tell my wife, and she, I said, and she said, yeah, I heard that helicopter out there. She goes, that was, and I said, yeah. I said, he stopped, and it was and I told her, I described exactly what helicopter it was. And she said, that's really odd. And I said, yeah, it really was odd. I said, that's really kind of creepy, actually. Why is he stopping in front of my, in front of me and hovering in front of me? So anyway, again, I call what I thought was a MUFON investigator. I leave him a message. Of course, again, I get no phone call. Then during, all of a sudden, around 2:30 at 3 a.m., I started getting flyovers every night by a military helicopter. I mean, you can tell civilians and the military. It's freaking sounds exactly just, it's the same thing as the Black Hawk. Flying over low, literally low, over my house every night. And I'm like, we can't sleep. And it's like they almost know we're about to fall asleep. They fly over, literally. And I'm like, this goes on for like 6 months. And, we're losing sleep over this. We're getting frustrated over this. We have no one to, call. It's not like we can call our police and say, hey, can you please, I want to file a complaint on this military helicopter. Can you please ask them, to stop flying over my house at 2:33 a.m. in the morning?
Right.
So anyway, during this time, I'm starting to stay up later and later because I know as soon as I fall asleep, here comes this helicopter is going to fly over my house again. So I want to catch these freaking bozos in the freaking act. I'm frustrated. It's like, again, I don't know what I can do, but I just want to catch them, I want to, I guess, maybe take a picture and prove that I'm not, that we're not crazy. And so out of habit, and, most people I'm sure do this, I go to the kitchen, I go to the refrigerator to get me something to drink. Well, before I do that, I have two windows in my kitchen, one facing north and one facing west. The one facing west is my front yard. Well, directly in front of my window is my mailbox. And it's covered, it's got bricks around it, seeing that. And so anyway, I look out the window because I always look out, kind of like a neighborhood watch thing. We kind of keep, our neighbors keep an eye on each other's houses and keep people from vandalizing, or at least we can catch them, because it's happened a few times in the past in our neighborhood. So out of habit, I always do that. Well, I'm looking out and I'm looking, both sides of, I'm looking left and right. And to my left, I see what I thought was a coyote at the time, but it wasn't like a regular coyote. At the time I don't, said At the time, I didn't know what a Dogman was, and I just thought it was this biggest coyote I ever saw. Anyway, it just walked past all the other houses. I mean, it's in the kind of almost in the middle of the street. There's no lights. I mean, it's kind of, there's low lighting on one side, on the left side, but it's low. It's not really bright. But in front of my house, there's no light. And we don't keep our front lights on. Maybe that's a bad habit, but we don't. And neither does my neighbors. So anyway, walks right in front of my mailbox. I mean, literally gets right in front of my mailbox. And you can, I mean, its back literally walks up to it, and its back is level, if not maybe, I'm not going to swear on this, but a little taller than my mailbox. Top of my mailbox. My mailbox is like 4.5 feet, 50, feet tall, around 53 inches. I went out and measured it because I really wanted to know. And so anyway, it's this tall coyote, and it's gray. The reason I think it's a coyote because it's gray. And I didn't know at this point if it's a coyote. Is it a wolf? Because I don't know of any wolves in Texas, but I've never seen one. But it's the biggest coyote or wolf I've ever seen. And then I'm thinking maybe it's interbred, with a wolf, and maybe it's why it's so big. But it's gray. It's got really coarse fur. I mean, it's obvious even at the lighting. I mean, there's a little bit of lighting because on the right side of the street there's the street lights, but so you can kind of see the ambience of the light. So you can it's not completely dark. It's just not really lit.
Right.
But so I'm looking at this big, huge, whatever it is, and it's stopped. It turns to the window and it looks up and it stares at me. And I said in my previous story, in my notes, I said, I don't know if it was looking at me at first. It was just looking at my house, or it was looking for an animal. But I feel it saw me because it stopped. I mean, and it stared at me for like 15 to 20 seconds. I mean, literally we had a stare down. I'm looking at this thing and it's looking at me. And so I know it saw me. I mean, I got the blinds open. So it was pretty obvious it could see me. And it had these goldish looking eyes, it had, that eye shine.
Yep.
And except now when it turned its head a little bit, you could tell, I mean, it looked, but it's kind of turned its head like it's, when you're looking, you kind of look around just to make sure everything around you is clear. And it kind of looked reddish to me. I mean, the eye shine turned reddish. Now, like you said, the problem with this is there's no direct lighting on this. I'm just going to call it Dogman because that's what I think it is, but it was just too big to be a coyote and too big to be a wolf. Mm. Again, I raised a shepherd wolf, and it was bigger than most shepherds. And like I said, I could stand it up on my rear. I told Jeff I could stand it up on rear haunches, and my shepherd wolf could stand about 6'3". And this thing was just
really quick.
Go ahead.
Now, having had the experience with your dog, and obviously how big your dog was, and you could stand it up, and it was 6'3".
Yeah.
If this thing was to stand up, just an estimated guess, how tall do you think this thing would have been?
Easily?
Yeah.
Minimum 7'5".
Wow.
Minimum. And the reason I say that is because my shepherd wolf was probably standing up maybe 2.5 feet, maybe a little more higher.
Right.
3, from its haunches, on all fours to its back. If this thing measured 4.5 feet, and I'm just going off just what I'm, is what I consider what it looked like, because it not only was it tall, it was long. I mean, this thing was long. I mean, it was really elongated, and it was massive. I mean, its chest was really big, and it was long. So it was, I mean, it was really kind of weird looking how long it was. Its measurements were weird. I mean, I know that's not probably the best description or something.
It's the best that you can give us, because it's such a hard thing to.
It didn't matter. I mean, if you know, anyone that's raised animals, raised dogs, different brands, and like wolves and all. I've been around a lot of wolves in my life. I used to, you know, work at animal sanctuaries and stuff, and wolves, and I know I know how big a wolf gets. You know, most wolves, but this thing was, like I said, it was long. It was kind of long, and it was massive in the chest area, but it's. I don't know really how weird I'd describe it. But it had a look like a coyote. The face kind of looked like a coyote, German Shepherd maybe look on its snout.
Okay.
And I mean, I could see its teeth a little bit. It kind of glared its teeth at me a little bit. Some people call it, I've heard, you know, I've listened to some people call it a smile.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was growling at me. I don't know. But it wanted to make sure I saw its teeth. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say it really like, rawr, you know, it didn't growl at me. I never heard it growl.
Right.
It just kind of like it showed its teeth at me to, like, you know, it let me know I can see you.
Now, with the length of this thing,
yeah.
Was there a tail that made it longer, or?
I didn't measure the tail. I only used the body.
Okay.
So that was the question you asked me earlier. It did have a tail.
It did. Okay.
Yes, it did have a tail. It wasn't a long tail.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of a, let's see.
Did it? What dog would it resemble? Like a husky, a shepherd? Was it bushy?
It was. You ever seen Pomeranians? How bushy they're kind of messy their tails get when they get kind of bushy long.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're not trimmed. It was like a kind of a unkept tail, maybe about. I mean, I really didn't measure his tail. I'm trying to remember it, and it kind of, you know, because maybe a foot and a half, maybe two. I can't really tell you. I wasn't really paying attention to his tail. That really wasn't my big thing. All I know is it had a bushy tail, and it had that same coarse, crappy-looking fur, like it needed a bath, like it hadn't been brushed in forever.
Right, right.
And, but that's what the tail looked like.
Okay.
It wasn't like super long by any means. It was just kind of bushy. Like I said, it reminds me. I have two palms, and it just looks like a palm tail that hasn't been combed. It hasn't been combed in a few days. It's just kind of really unkept looking. You know, it's bushy, but it's not super long, but it's not super short. It's not a stub by any means. It's long enough to know that there's. I mean, like a foot, maybe. You know, it's just for its size, body, foot, maybe a little longer tail. Wasn't the biggest tail. It was just bushy and unkept.
Okay.
And like I said, it looked like it needed a bath. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. I don't know how else to describe it. But like I said, I mean, I was looking more of its, you know, the girth around it. I mean, it was like this freaking. I want to say it's like that. That Werewolf in London girth, you know, that wolf they had, how fat it was around the chest, how big it was around the chest.
Right.
I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. I'm not going to describe it as something else because I didn't know. I'm saying because all I saw was the 4/4s, and it was just this big wide chest. And that's the only way I can describe it. You know, it was this big freaking wide chest, these kind of big arms. I can't tell you if they're muscular or not, because like I said, it's looking at me at the time, and in my mailbox, my mailbox is kind of in the way. But as it moves, I mean, I can see that its arms, its legs were kind of shorter. You know, the way it was walking on the floor. I mean, it was like, it didn't look right. I mean, it really just didn't look, it looked like, oh God, it looked like, I guess, a run, or, I mean, you know, it just wasn't put together right. It walked kind of, I don't know. I can't even say it walked right. It didn't walk wrong, but it didn't walk right. It just kind of like it had a glitch in it or something. I mean, that's kind of, it's weird. It just walked kind of
unnatural,
like,
kind of.
Kind of like an alpha, you know, like, hey, I'm the big guy on the block, you know. You know, I'm puffing my chest out and I'm the big guy, you know, kind of a little bit of a, kind of teeny bit of a swagger, but, you know, but it wasn't a swagger. It was more like it was trying to walk smoothly. And it was, you know, doing the best it can to walk very smooth, but having a little bit of a trouble. Anyway, so after it stared at me and, you know, and I obviously wanted to, you know, I guess, I don't know, have an accident. I mean, that's really, my stomach almost felt like it was falling out.
Right.
I mean, it felt, you know, my stomach dropped. I mean, it was like, my mouth dropped. I was like, I'm staring at something that doesn't look, you know, that doesn't look like it should even exist. That's all I can put it. You know, it's like I'm looking at this thing that just looks like it doesn't belong.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know our standards of normality, but, you know, to me, I've never seen an animal like it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I don't think there is a standard of normality with these things. Just like
Yeah,
you and I were talking, I can't, and I've tried to, you know, talk to a couple of other people and tried to explain exactly how what I saw moved, and it's a very hard thing to explain because there isn't a word that we have to explain.
Yeah, exactly. I can't explain to you how it walked. It walked odd. I mean, it walked like it was trying to make an effort to walk smoothly.
Yeah.
But it was having trouble walking smoothly. And I guess this is, like I said, after it stopped looking at me, and after it gave me that look, and it just, and I'm sitting there trying to, like, of course, you analyze this stuff after you've gone through it, and you can think, but, it just turned to me like, you're not worth my time anymore. I'm just going to walk off. And it walked to the end of the street, turned right, and that was, and walked down the street, and that was the last I saw of it. But what got me about the whole thing, besides how creepy, scary it looked, I mean, I'm going to say that, and I've been around animals my life, and I'm not scared of any animals, but that thing scared the bejeebus out of me. I mean, to this day, I won't go outside at night, check my mail, or go work in my garage with a door open without carrying, at my side. And I know I maybe shouldn't be saying this, but I walk out to carry mail. I carry my 9mm with me. Yeah. Or if I'm in the garage, I have a assortment of, pointy weapons, or my 9mm with me. So, and nothing leaves my side too close, because this is years later. So, that's how nervous this thing had made me. I mean, I will walk. The first thing I do when I walk outside, I look around, I get to the front, right where my roof, I look on my roof, I run to my mailbox, I get my mail, and I run back. And if that makes me some kind of a chicken, then it makes me a chicken. But I personally don't ever want to run into this thing in person. I don't know how else to, but that's how it made me feel. It just put that fear of God in you, I guess, or fear of the devil, or whatever you want to say. But like I said, I look back on analyzing it, I just could understand the eye shine. That's what got me the most about it. I mean, well, everything got me about it, but looking at his eyes, it was just like, where did it just like it had a natural light, system built into it. I was like, where did the eye shine come from? So anyway, I mean, that's about all I can say about that. But again, going past this, I mean, does it have anything to do with my ongoing events? I don't know. I just don't. I just thought it was weird because at the time I'd never even heard of the Dogman. I never heard, like I said, all I ever heard of was Sasquatch or Bigfoot, or whatever you want to call it, the Patterson film. That was my knowledge of what a cryptid was. So anyway, a few more, it said the flyovers continue. And right around, I guess, 6 months, I'm estimating here, maybe a little short, a little longer. One night, about in the evening, well, it's still daylight. I'm going to make sure that's clear. It was still daylight. Okay. My daughter and I are going to go do our normal walk around the neighborhood. And so we're out in the front yard. I'm, of course, checking the mail. I've had it, but we look up. I mean, it's just around evening, and we look up, and I'm hearing military aircraft. Like I said, I've been around them all my life. I know the sound of a military aircraft compared to a civilian one. I look up to the north of me, above the houses, and there are 13 military transports flying over west, which really close together, really good close formation. So the first one, I think, turns north. The second one goes straight. The other one goes south, and I guess the pattern repeats itself until the end one. So, excuse me if I got the direction wrong. I'll just remember each one went a different direction until the last one. So after that, I got no more flyovers. Nothing, again, thinking, wow, that was nice. All this is over, right? Well, that's what I thought. I said, everything's returning to normal. Well, about a little bit after that, I get a phone call from MUFON. And this guy is saying, hey, I'm sorry I got, it took me so long to get back to, to get with you about your report. We've been really backed up. I'm just going to tell you what he said. And I said, and he proceeds to ask me questions. And I tell him, I said, I already had a MUFON investigator come out and talk to me. And I told him, I went on to explain. I said, the events that, I showed him my pictures. I showed him, I did an interview with him. Me and my family did. I showed him my video. I told him, I told him that he wanted it, and I didn't give it to him. Then I proceeded to tell him all the events that transpired after that, excluding the mutated coyote or Dogman. I didn't tell him that. So I left that part out.
Right.
He proceeds to tell me, and again, I quote, says, I never heard of that person, and there's only one other person besides myself that investigates your area. At that moment, I get a little, one of those, you ever got one of like somebody just hits you with a brick, reality across your face, your mouth drops and time stands still. Well, that was me at that moment. So I proceeded to ask him, and I said, well, then I said, if you're the only two, I said, who else has access to your files? And he tells me no one else should have access to our files. Again, I'm starting to freak out more, and I'm like, then I said, well, and I basically said, well, somebody does. I said, because somebody come out here pretending to be an investigator. And I said, I would like to know who it is. And if you could find that out for me. And he said, and he was very, cordial with me and, and giving. I mean, it's like you could tell, he's like, I could see he was kind of freaking out a little bit too. his voice was a little stressed too at that point in time. He says, "I will find out and I will call you back." So, anyway, so that was, that was pretty much it in the story. And I never understood why we got harassed for all this time. I don't understand anything why my videos may have caused the events that occurred. I mean, I was, just reporting what we all do things different, but I was just thought it was a neat thing that I got pictures of a UFO and some videotape. And I mean, but I'll never understand what exactly happened and why these events happened. It just always seemed weird to me. And again, like I told Jeff, I said there's a few other events, details I left out of the story, and for obvious reasons my wife didn't want to bring up, but they do pertain to the story. But it's just I don't really feel comfortable talking about them publicly.
Right.
So, but anyway, that was pretty much it. So that was my story.
That's, I mean, when
Go
you
ahead,
and I
Jeff.
spoke for a couple hours prior to the interview, and when I narrated it, like I said, I skimmed through it. The title is spot on.
Yeah.
And then I narrated it, and as I was narrating it, I was like, this is all pointing to one direction for me. I think everything was just, it all happened for a reason. I think that guy came there, and this is just my view, to scare you. And obviously that didn't work. So
yeah, but he never threatened me while I was there. He just wanted. The only thing I felt odd about is after he asked me if he could have my stuff, and when I said no, I want to keep my originals, but I'd be more than happy to give you copies. That was the only time that I felt any tension from this gentleman. I mean, it's like he wasn't happy that I wasn't going to hand over my stuff right then and there.
Now, was he dressed? How was he dressed?
He was dressed in slacks and a dress shirt, short sleeve.
Okay.
In which, at the time, I mean, just a regular kind of
casual dress.
Yeah, khaki. Well, I'm not going to go on there. I'm just saying he just, you could tell he had, kind of casual dress, just slacks and a kind of a dress shirt, short sleeve dress shirt. So, and wearing a watch. So
yeah,
that's about it. I mean, he looked pretty like you would never notice pick him out of a crowd. You wouldn't be able to pick him out of a crowd. He'd just be a normal. I mean, he was a little over, little overweight. Most people get kind of like the what do you call it, the pot belly.
Right.
Yeah, a little bit of pot belly on him. But other than that, he wasn't, anybody that stood out.
Yeah,
so
this is.
But I thought one thing he did say to me when we were out discussing the first UFO I saw over the house. He started talking to me about how to he said, well, if you really want to measure, he was telling me stuff that, distance, height. And I mean, it was kind of discussing, it was talking to me in a military slang.
Okay.
That was the only thing I felt odd is when he started talking, and I looked at him and like, really? I'm an engineer and all, but I mean, he's talking to me in military slang a little bit. And then it's like, I'm not trying to make anything out of this. And so please don't think I am. I'm not trying to embellish this or anything. It's just, I thought that was a little odd to me. And it's like he corrected it real quick. And he was talking to me and then he corrected it real quick. Like, oh, I'm sorry. You're here. Kind of like, and went back to his normal,
civilian
self.
Right.
But like I said, that's the only time I thought it was a little odd. And like, you know, I didn't bring that point because I really didn't think, you know, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, you know, I thought about it, but it just, to me, sometimes, and maybe I'm wrong here, sometimes the minor points are actually the main points, the details, but it was, to me, it's like, it just seemed like it was just odd.
Right.
You know, because, you know, people talk to you sometimes, and if they're in the military, they're going to, you know, they're going to do what comes natural to them. And sometimes they'll forget who they're speaking to, or, you know, at the moment, and they'll just start speaking. So it's why I'm not contributing too much into it. But now that I look back on it, considering everything happened, it starts, and again, I'm not saying everything happened, but it starts to fall into place now, because it starts to make more sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, after the Black Hawk helicopter came and hovered over me, and for 2 minutes in my neighborhood, literally in front of my, right here in my neighborhood, you know, and I know I wasn't the only neighbor looking at this thing. And, you know, this guy is looking at me, he's hovering in front of me. I, at that point, knew there was something not right here. And the fact that he was never returning my calls. And I'm like, something's going, and then, of course, you know, after the flyovers every night, that kind of cemented the deal that this guy is not who he thinks he is or says he was. You know,
right. Yeah, like what I was trying to say was not, he wasn't there to scare you. I think he was there more or less to try to get the pictures. I mean, this is my view. I'm not, and like when you said, you know, you're not trying to embellish anything. I mean, I don't feel like you are. And I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to just sit here and listen to what you're saying and not connect the dots. Because this guy came, composed, you know, asked you for the originals, was a little perturbed when he didn't get the originals. Then you got Blackhawks coming, and then he's not answering your call. And then all of a sudden, there's this quote unquote Dogman in front of your house, just your house. I mean, and staring directly at you. Not, I mean, like you said, you don't know if he was staring directly at you, but I mean, you could see him. I mean,
and he ignored every other house.
Right. And
he literally stopped in front of mine, ignored every other house, and after he turned, he ignored every house. I mean, there's only one other house, but you know, if any house would have been a good house for a Dogman to walk up to, since then, like I said, I've done a lot of research on things, cryptids, and you know, you always hear them going up to windows and looking in windows.
Mm-hmm. And I doubt he was.
That would have been the perfect house, because it had these big windows with no curtains. It would have been the perfect house to look into.
Right.
He ignored it. He walked by it. It was like, you know, like I said, I just thought it was this mutated coyote or shepherd. I didn't know what it was. It was huge. It was messed up looking, and it had these freaking evil looking eyes. You know, you know, the stuff you see on and Hollywood movies.
Right.
You know, that would, and like I said, why didn't he go to the other houses?
Yeah, and I highly doubt that he was out in front of your house looking for the rabbits that hang out in your yard.
No, it wasn't, because my neighborhood at the time, it had plenty of rabbits out, and it could have had plenty of rabbits. I mean, literally, we had plenty of rabbits in our neighborhood. I mean, our neighborhood is full of rabbits. You know, there's if you are an animal or a coyote, you're never going to run dry with rabbits in our neighborhood, because it's just full of them. So, you know, it's just, like I said, I watched it walk through all around all the other houses. And like I said, these houses, I mean, he could have stopped at any of these houses. He could have stopped at the one after. Like I said, it had no curtains there. He just walked right past everything like nothing was interested in. The only house that was interested in was mine.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I don't know. Like I said, I don't know. I guess now looking back at it, I guess you can put, you know, A plus B plus C, you know, equals D, and put it all together. But at the time, I was just like, you know, this just didn't make any sense to me. I mean, again, I wasn't trying to be, look at any, I was just living my life and trying to understand, why I'm being harassed every night by a military helicopter. My family is, we're not getting any sleep. We're being harassed. And it's like, I'm telling you, Jeff, it's like they always knew we're about to go to sleep before they fly over. I mean, it was almost I could say, and I will say this, not all the time did they fly over to, I mean, it was majority of the time, but most of, it's like when we just go to bed, they would fly over.
Yeah. And like you said, there's no military bases in the
There's
in
none.
vicinity.
Like I said, the only military base I knew of at the time was in Grand Prairie, Texas, and it shut down. It was a naval base, and it shut down years ago. So, and I even asked this guy, they exposed the MUFON investigator, and he said there are no military bases around my area, because that was the one question, somehow we got into talking about all this, and he said there are no military bases around here. Because, you hear UFO sometimes going around military bases. It seems to be a thing about them,
Right.
There's a military base, you got a UFO or water. You got a UFO. I mean, we don't have any water around except Levon, and that was way, that was east of me. So that I could understood why these things were, one thing, over my neighborhood, literally, I mean, over my neighborhood, over these houses. I never understood that. I'll never understand that. I mean, it's like, if I didn't know better, it was like, what do you call it, doing research?
Yeah.
That's the only thing that came over to me, came to me, is these things are doing research on people. That's all I can think of is research. And maybe that's a little outlandish, a little fantastic, thinking, but, that's the only word I can think of now that I think about it, is it's why otherwise would a UFO be hovering 20 feet above a house? I mean, literally, what else is it going to be doing 20 feet above a house?
Yeah.
Cooling its radiator, what? I don't know.
It makes, none of it makes sense, but it all does kind of make sense once you step back. And
yeah, it does. And now it does. And again, like I said, you asked me if I want to give, I'll give the pictures and stuff, and I will. I'm happy to share all that. I have no problem with it.
I really do. It's just, when I reached out to you in the comment section, I never ever expected this bizarre of an experience. I mean,
I was just, honestly, I wasn't asking. I really didn't comment to get a result.
I know.
I was just commenting, replying to another person commenting.
Yeah, it's like,
I mean, I was just saying, hey, this is my experience. I wasn't looking, because we never bothered to talk to anybody about it. I mentioned it at the time to my brother, and my brother at the time thought it was kind of neat. And but the rest of my family, of course, when you tell other people this, they look at you, or your friends look at you like, sure, that happened, sure.
Yeah. Like you got 6 heads.
Nobody believes you.
What did the MUFON guy make of the whole guy, the other guy coming up? What was his kind of? Did he? He
was kind of, like I said, he was kind of freaked out. I mean, you could tell there's some tension, and he has some tension in his voice. I mean, he was like, when he said, I have never heard, he was emphasized, he goes, I'm going to tell you how he said, I have never heard of this person. And he said, I and one other person, and, investigate your area. He goes, I've never heard of this person before in my life. He said, but I will check into this and let you know.
Yeah,
so,
that's,
which he never found out. So,
right.
He never found out who that person was. So again, that left me with the question, with the one word question is like, why, what did I do to get this type, this type of attention? I mean, what did my family do? All I did was freaking take, we walked out, my wife walked out to walk, take the dogs out. We witnessed something, and then again, she takes the dogs out, she sees it while I'm gone. Then I see the third one, it's like, okay, maybe I wasn't supposed to see something, but if you don't want someone to see something, then why have it in an area so they can't see in a city, where people can witness this stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, what's your point? I mean, what did I videotape? I haven't looked at my videos in a long time. I haven't really looked at them. Maybe I missed something because, maybe I did. Maybe there's something there I missed that they want to see if I caught. I don't know. Again, this is speculation on my part. I can't say, either or. I don't know. I'm just speculating. Again, I guess before I sit, I give you the stuff, I'm going to look over it one more time and see maybe there's something I missed. Maybe there was something they were trying to hide that they were afraid I might have. Because like I said, the first guy who I thought was an investigator, he looked at it. That's why he wanted this. He said, can I take this stuff? And, like I said, he wasn't happy when I said no. So he saw something. First he tried to sit there, especially the one with the water tower. He said, oh, that's just a water tower. I said, just keep watching. And then the water tower tilts at 40 degrees, and then an airplane flies, even with it. Oh, he goes, that's not a water tower. I was like, no. And then I think you'll see something flying around from the back of it, coming around from the back of it. So you'll notice that in the video. So that's when he admitted that's not a water tower. And plus, I told him, I said, you can drive back there. So I have no water tower back that way. There's no water tower facing behind my house. So.
Yeah, I
mean,
and like you said,
okay. If you want to say something weird, that was weird.
Yeah, yeah. And not only like when me and you were talking, not only was it at an angle, but there was also an airplane flying.
Yeah, and believe it or not, he was trying to convince me. He thought I tilted my camera. And like, even if I tilted my camera, it's not going to tilt. The image is still going to be there.
Right. Absolutely.
So, but when the airplane flew, even with it, that's when he said, that's not a water tower. He agreed with me. I mean, I guess he had no other recourse. So maybe that's why he wanted it. I mean, I guess that was something to catch, but, I didn't think anything. I mean, yeah, did I think something of it? Yes, I did. But did I think it was that big of a deal? No. But again, I'm not, like I said, I told you before, it's not the first UFO I've seen. Certainly not the most dramatic one I've seen. To me, it was not that big of a deal. To me, it wasn't. I mean, I'm not dumb to the technology, being an engineer. I can tell you from being an engineer, mechanical engineer, that the most of the stuff that you see that's coming out now has been out for at least 20 to 50 years. You're just seeing the basic byproduct of what is coming out. You're not seeing the good the real product. That's all I'm going to say about as far as being in gym. I'm not bragging or trying to say anything to you. I'm just telling you as far as an engineer and the other engineers I know, what you see now coming out and for public consumption is really the basic stuff. So, and, it's just that technology is so advanced that people don't even realize what they think when they say, oh, no, that's really cool. And I'm like, that's really nothing. But, I guess to some people that's, a pretty cool thing. So, anyway, that was my experience. And it was one I don't really hope my family ever has to repeat. And of all that, believe it or not, the Dogman was, even though I was in the house, is the one I really don't want to repeat. I really don't. I mean, yeah, I have an interest in them now. Do I want to see one? Not in person, but I mean, not outside. I mean, I don't mind, if I was in an enclosure and I could see one, but it's still disturbing to see one because, I mean, to this day, like I said, I won't walk outside my house without carrying a firearm or, something else with me, to protect me, not that I could, after knowing now, if I knew then what I know now, not that it would protect me, at least from what I hear, they, my 9mm would be like a BB gun to it. So, but I don't know. Yeah, that was like I said, that was the most memorable part of the whole experience and the most disturbing part of the whole experience to me. I mean, if anyone's ever seen one of those things look into your eye, I mean, there's nothing more disturbing.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole thing's disturbing. It's
I mean, I used to have to sit there if anyone that has ever raised wolves or been around leading shepherd wolves, you have to play the intimidation display.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hold them down, prove who's alpha. And when that goes with wolves and stuff, you're around them, you cannot ever really relax. You always have to constantly make sure they know you're the alpha. And, but I'll be honest with you. I mean, I don't know anybody could be an alpha to one of those things. I mean, it's just, it was disturbing. It was just, like I said, I mean, maybe I'm making a bigger deal out of it than I should, but, when it's one of those things, I was behind a window and I'm like, if that thing wanted to come through that window, my window wouldn't have stopped it. I would have been dead meat and that would have been the last thing anybody saw me. So, it's really weird. I mean, like I said, maybe it was right. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was used as an intimidation tool.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only thing that I can come up with. And that was
sense.
Just from reading it, not even being there and experiencing it. And I mean, as you know, and you heard the narration, I was dumbfounded at the end. Like, I couldn't quite wrap my head around how obvious they were by what they were doing. Yeah. It's like, the government does things like that purposely to just
Well, honestly, it worked. Wow. It literally shut me up. I mean, I have not shared any of my stuff. I have not cared to share it. I will now and then now and then said, "Oh, I saw one of these," but I never shared the UFO stuff to anybody. I mentioned it to my family, once or twice, and they blew me off because like most people, if they don't see it for themselves, to them it's not a big deal. So,
right.
They didn't, they never understood what my wife and I went through. And again, details not publicized, I talked to you about.
Yeah.
I mean, I really want to say it, but for my wife's, sake, I'm not going to say it,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the key thing on this channel is trust and, anonymity. So whatever you want to keep
most people,
to yourself, it's you.
Yeah, you can kind of maybe get where I'm going, but it's just that, okay. Yeah, those details too. Like I said, it would probably draw the story and really seem in it. But in my eyes, because to me it's kind of an open letter, what really, about an ending to a story, what really happened. Well, I don't know, but I know you're right now. I agree with you 100%. I think it was an intimidation. It was all about intimidation. It kept me, shut me up, and it worked. At least for this many years, it worked. I'm just, I'm like, I'm at this point where, why do I even care? It's like, to me, it's like there's way more, to me, interesting stories, people's, events that happened in their life than what happened to me. I'm not saying, I'm not, blowing my story, because by all means, it was very serious. And, you know, the event, you know, like I said, something I thought was just innocent turned into something, you know, to a, you know, 6 or 7 month long, actually longer than that, again, harassment and of my family and our well-being. And like I said, I can't ever, I to this day, I can't walk outside without looking over my shoulder up on my roof and, you know, worrying. I mean, honest to God, I mean, I do not walk outside without this sinking feeling in my stomach. And, you know, I feel sorry for anybody that's seen one of these things and, you know, right in front of them in person. I mean, without something separating them. Even then, you know, because if that's what it did to me and I'm behind the kitchen window and it's outside there in my mailbox and it's staring at me, God, you know, I can only imagine you know, the feelings somebody else experienced in person, you know, right then, you know, facing one of these things. I mean, you know, some people don't understand that you will, if you ever experience it, then you'll understand.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and, you know, I mean, like I said, that's all I can say about it. I hope it's over. Like I said, I'll share all the stuff. It's up to you if you want to share my pictures and video. It's kind of a boring, to me, it's kind of a boring video until the ending. And, you know, when I'm doing that water tower, because you watch this whole video and nothing really happens really until the end. Then you kind of start seeing things happening. To me, it's kind of a boring video. And that's how I treat it. Is like, well, that was interesting. You know, it's tilting at a 40-degree angle. You know, here comes this plane flying even. I mean, that was really kind of, you know, that was interesting to me, but it wasn't like, oh, wow, you know. But I mean, I don't know why it wasn't to me, I guess, but it should be. I guess that would be, but to me, it was just not. I guess I just put it filed in the back of my mind, you know, like maybe I don't want it to disturb me like it should be disturbing me, you know, especially having these things inside around my neighborhood this close, you know, this kind of close proximity, because really it opens the question is what's really going on, you know, and I would like the answer. I mean, what's really going on? What do they really want? What are they, you know, why are they doing? And I'm sure I'm not the only neighborhood, you know, these craft were flying over, you know, so that would make no sense. But anyway, I hope, you know, I kind of enjoyed the experience I had.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's truly, and the interesting thing about all of this and other encounters as well is that now once you got a visual of these things, you're now kind of obsessed with, you know, like finding out what the heck I saw.
No, I'm not. Actually, quite the opposite. I really, honestly, I know you would think you would. Now, the Dogman,
Yeah,
I did say I am kind of interested in, because I
that's
want to
what
know.
I meant with the Dogman. You're kind of obsessed.
Yeah,
'cause
that I do want to know.
You're working on your truck for that and this and
Yeah,
that.
I'm designing, you know, I guess we can talk about this. I'm designing my Jeep to actually go out and research Dogman. So I'm actually designing that specifically for that purpose. So, you know, I mean, I guess we can share that, but I am curious I do want to know about those. I mean, I really do want to know more about these things, because obviously, you know, even just from listening to you, and I've listened to, you know, other podcasts, and I've heard, you know, there's been a lot of activity in Texas, on the border, Oklahoma, obviously Mississippi, and all that surrounding me, you know, but they're becoming more and more frequent in Texas and central Texas, not just South Texas or East Texas, but central in my area, in Denton, you know. Actually, I didn't tell you this earlier, but my wife, one of her coworkers, this is going near Denton, between Denton, up toward McKinney and going toward Denton, in between. There's a lot of farmland. And he says one day he saw a big black, what he thought said it was a wolf, or coyote, and he said it jumped from. He saw it jump from the street, one side of the street, over a farm fence across the other street. I mean, it was, that's a good 15, 20 feet.
Yeah, that's
So,
massive.
and
Yeah.
he saw that around probably 7:30 p.m. And when he's coming off from work, and because my wife went out, baby, we had to go out there one time, and it was a really good drive, and it was out in, the real rural country area, and so, I wanted to go out and investigate that, because it's like, well, now that I know what dogmen are, it's like, I want to go see if there are dogmen out there.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I was talking about when I said obsessed, because I've talked to so many people. There's 2 girls had an encounter in New Jersey, and one is petrified. And these are, young girls, 17 years old. One's petrified, and one is obsessed with figuring out everything about these things.
Yeah.
Like, so it's something that's weird. Once you see one of these creatures, you're either petrified, terrified, not leaving your house, or you become obsessed and you want to learn as much as possible.
I guess I'm on the obsessed part. That I do. The UFO and the part,
Yeah.
I don't care about. Believe it or not, after this, I don't care about that part.
I can't blame you, honestly, on that part. I mean,
Now, well, as we always know, as the story goes, now, like I said, I'm caught up. As the story goes on this, once you find one of these or get any proof, guess who comes knocking on your door?
Yeah.
So my idea behind this is my concise video proof of these. I have no concern to go out and interact with one of these things. I have no concern or desire to kill one of these things, unless, of course, it does me or my family harm or someone I know. Now, my Jeep will be equipped with, obviously, self-protection. So, but that's not my concern or desire. My only concern or desire is to get proof these exist.
Yep. Research
and to share it with the public, and get it out there the best I can, because the one thing I see is lack of, and it's not that people haven't gotten video or pictures of these things, but as you know, Google, YouTube, and other sites censor this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they come directly, who did they come after? They trace the IP, so we've already got contingencies of how to get around all that. But my point is, I am obsessed to get to know these things. And that's my sole purpose, is to go out and research these things. And my vehicle is being built specifically just to do that. So, if anybody wants to help, throw in some, that'd be great.
Yeah, send me an email and I'll get in touch with you and we can figure it out.
Okay.
Kind of running out of time here. Don't hang up when we end the interview. Is there anything that you'd like to say to everybody before we end the interview?
Be careful who you let in the house. But especially if you ever catch a video or just something, and you call a place like Newfound and you invite somebody in your house, make sure verify who you invite into your house is who they say they are.
Absolutely.
Okay. Don't do what I did and just, blindly accept them in there thinking they are who they are. And because otherwise you may go through what my family and I went through. And I'm going to say this one more time. I know I feel like I'm repeating myself here, but there are details I left out of this story that Jeff knows that, that could possibly happen, that you don't want happening. So, That's my advice. And please be careful out there. Especially if you ever encounter one of these dogmen.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because like I said, I saw one from the window, and it was that was a eye-opening experience for me. But again, what I'm doing maybe not smart, but it's the direction I feel it's driving me into. Is like, I want to know more about these things, because knowledge is power, and you can't, if you don't know anything about something, you can't combat what's coming. I mean, again, these things are becoming more and more prevalent in my state, and in most states they are. And so I think the more we learn, because we're not going to get any answers from the government.
Absolutely. I mean, their lips are sealed. So
yeah.
Well, we are up on time. Like I said, don't hang up. But it was great having you on. And anybody that wishes to join G-Man here on the research and quest to find the truth, email me, and I'll get you in touch with him.
And I really appreciate that. And like I said, I mean, if you be more than happy to ever come on again if I get any more new stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great night.
You too.
All right, folks. So, in my eyes, these two interviews are very important. Not only do they show us that these things are dangerous, that the government is dangerous, and that there is good out there. Brad was on a channel, another Dogman related channel, and in my eyes was really not treated how a subscriber should be treated. As a guest, in my eyes, deserves the utmost respect. And who am I to question or belittle their experience? I wasn't there. That's pretty much the biggest reason why I started this channel, because I had my own experience and I know how it feels to be looked down upon, questioned, not believed. And it was an honor having Brad on this channel and just giving him a platform to share. So I'd like to thank you all for listening to this upload today. Truly does mean the world to me. Thank you for all of your support. And with that, please stay safe, happy, healthy, ever vigilant, because due to these encounters, due to these subscriber interviews, we are learning just how dangerous these things are and how cunning they are. And they are out there and they are watching our pets, our children, our loved ones, our friends. Just because they don't believe doesn't mean that we don't know, because we do. Anyway, with that, God bless. And don't forget, tonight's live stream at midnight Eastern Standard Time.